That is carried. With respect to item 5.5, what is the committee's pleasure? It's Mr. Neufeld's request to leave item 5.5 tabled until February 3rd, 2015 planning meeting. May I have a motion, please? Councillor Collins and Councillor Pasuta, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you. All right, members of the public and committee, item 6.1 has been pulled from the agenda. We are replacing it with 6.6. And Councillor Johnson, you are up.
Thank you very much, and I would like to move 6.6 with the following condition to be added as Appendix D, as special condition number 19. I don't know if you all have a copy of that. It is that the owner applicant shall provide a construction management plan for, but not limited to, the following items: construction truck route, phasing construction plan, street cleaning schedules, maintenance schedule for Copperfield Lane, and minimize building debris on and off site, to the satisfaction of the Senior Director of Growth Management. And if I can get a seconder for that, I'd like to speak to it.
All right, and Councillor Pearson, and just before you go on any further, before we move any motions, I do need to go back to the public process.
Totally get
I can do that now, or I can come back to you, or whatever you want.
If we can just put this as the amendment, then whoever's speaking to it can speak to that as well.
Okay.
This is an area in Mount Hope that has been inundated with construction. It's all brand new housing that's been going in there, and it's been a very enigma of the city of Hamilton in the sense that we have several builders and several construction sites going on at once. And our staff have been working diligently over the last 4 years to coordinate everyone so that the streets are being cleaned, that the construction debris is not becoming a hazard on our roads. And I just want to make sure that going forward, any new development coming forward is going to follow that guidelines that the staff have been working so diligently upon. And I'd like to thank them for helping me put this amendment together.
All right, thank you. So it is housekeeping issues that we're really moving. I'm going to go back to the public process now, and this is something that in the planning committee needs to happen because this is a public meeting. So I'll be reading this out. Members of the public, in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act, please be advised that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Council of the City of Hamilton before Council approves the draft plan of subdivision, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Council of the City of Hamilton to the Ontario Municipal Board, and the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Municipal Board unless, in the opinion of the board, there are reasonable grounds to do so. I will be reading this out 3 times. Are there any members of the public wishing to address this item, number 6.6 on the agenda? Are there any members of the public wishing to address item 6.6 on the agenda? One more time. Are there any members of the public wishing to address 6.6 on the agenda? And seeing none, may I have a motion to close the public meeting? Councillor Johnson, Councillor Collins, all in favor? Thank you. Okay, so we've done that. And may I have a motion to waive the staff presentation, please? Councillor Farr, Councillor Pasuta, all in favor? That is carried. And do we don't have any representative willing to, wanting to speak to this? James? He wants to hear your amendment, Councillor Johnson.
Absolutely. That the owner applicant shall provide a construction management plan for, but not limited to, the following items: a construction truck route, phasing construction plan, street cleaning schedule, maintenance schedule for Copperfield Lane, and minimize building debris on and off site.
So James, they are basically housekeeping. They're already in play. Any comments? All right, thank you. I appreciate that. Now may I have a motion to approve the amendments before us, moved by Councillor Brenda Johnson, seconded by Councillor Maria Pearson. All in favor?
Carried.
That is carried. And may I have a motion to approve the recommendations as amended? Councillor Johnson, Councillor Pearson, all in favor? That is carried. Thank you very much.
One down.
So you can stay until 1:30, though.
I'm staying till 1:30. Nice try, Jay.
All right, then.
I'm here forever for you. That's
All right. Council, committee, please. All right, we're moving on to item 6.2. Members of the public, in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act, please be advised that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting to make written submissions to the council or make written submissions to the council of the City of Hamilton before council approves the condominium conversion, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the council of the City of Hamilton to the Ontario Municipal Board, and the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Municipal Board unless, in the opinion of the board, there are reasonable grounds to do so. And this is item 6.2, which is the application for a condominium conversion for lands known as 547 King Street West in Ward 1 in Hamilton. And I will ask this 3 times. Are there any members of the public wishing to address the committee on this particular item? Are there any members of the public wishing to address the committee on this item? Last time. Are there any members of the public wishing to address the committee on this item at this time? And I'm seeing none. Are you the applicant, agent? All right, I will come back to you then. And seeing no one coming forward to speak, may I have a motion to close the public meeting? Councillor Aidan Johnson, and seconded by Councillor Doug Connolly. All in favor to close the public meeting? Carried, thank you. Now, we'll move on to the staff presentation. Just looking at my notes here. Okay, so I'd like to invite Greg McDonald from Planning to please come down for the staff presentation. Councillor Pearson?
Madam Chair, I just wondered if the ward councillor wishes to see the presentation, or can we waive the rules of having the presentation?
Thank you. I appreciate that. Does the ward councillor wish to waive the presentation or have the presentation?
I'm satisfied that I understand this project, and if my fellow councillors feel they understand too, then I'm fine waiving the presentation.
All right, and there are no members of the public here to speak to it other than the agent. So may I have a motion to waive the presentation? Councillor Collins, Councillor Aidan Johnson, sure. All in favor? Carried. That is carried. Thank you, Greg. Good presentation. And Councillor Collins, you have a question, please?
I do, Madam Chairman, and it's through you to Greg. And it's in regards to the tax situation. The last condominium conversion that we had in front of us, I had asked how the municipal tax structure changes when the building goes from multi-res to a multi-res condominium format. And there's nothing in the financials here, and I'm hoping that between now and council, our planning staff can contact our finance staff to ensure that there is no change in the tax structure if it's converted. So I just want that confirmation between now and council, and if they could provide that via email, it'd be great.
All right, thank you. And yeah, that's very good point. Does anybody want to address that now? Steve?
Through you, Madam Chairman, planning staff have had discussions with finance staff about the implications of the conversions, and one of the issues are the difficulties in identifying comparables. But generally what finance staff have advised is that it does have a negative impact onto the city with these conversions, and in fact there is a net loss in tax revenue to the city with the conversions that have occurred over time.
Councillor Collins?
Yep, thank you. And I would like to know what that impact is. And so what I've witnessed with other conversions is that they are converted to condominium and they remain as rentals. They're not sold, at least with the examples that I've been given by finance staff in the past. So I would like to know best guess scenario, what the financial implication is for the city, and if they could, again, have that, again, it's a best guess, we won't know with this particular property, but if they could use others that we've recently converted, last term of council, I think would be a good idea to present those to us, show us the percentages, and then we'd have an understanding as to why these are happening and the implications financially.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. And since we don't have anyone here from finance, would you like to move a motion on that or just leave it as direction? Direction is fine? All right, so we'll have that come to the next council meeting, December 17th, I believe that is, 2014. All right, thank you, Councillor Collins. Matt Johnson from Urban Solutions wishes to address the committee on behalf of the applicant. Please come down at this time to the podium. Just check to make sure the microphone is on, and introduce yourself, please.
Morning, members of the committee. Again, Matt Johnston, registered professional planner with Urban Solutions. Good morning, and just like to concur with the staff report. We've reviewed the conditions of approval and have no issues, and would just like to thank the work of Greg McDonald and Anita Fayback for processing and bringing the report forward. If there's any further questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Any questions for the applicant? All right. Yes, Councillor Collins, go ahead, please.
Is the intent, through you, Madam Chairman, is the intent to eventually sell these as individual units?
There's the intent to provide that flexibility. In terms of the timing when those actually go for sale, I can't confirm that right now.
Thank you, Councillor Collins. No further questions? Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Now, may I have a motion to approve the amendments before us? Do we have amendments before us? There are no amendments before us. No, I didn't think so. Okay. So may I have a motion to approve the recommendations as amended? Councillor Aidan Johnson, seconded by Councillor Matthew Green. All in favor, please? That is carried. Anyone opposed? No one's opposed. Thank you. Okay. Now, we closed off the public meeting, so we've done all that, right? And item 6.3, that was also pulled, right? Okay, thank you. So we'll move on to item 6.4, and I'll ask Councillor Johnson to please take over the chair, as this is in my ward. Thank you.
Okay, we're on to 6.4. This is the application for amendment to the Flamborough bylaw number 90-145-Z for lands located at 250 Concession 4 Road West in Flamborough, PED 14236 and Ward 15. So I'm going to put out there 3 times, please. Members of the public, in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act, please be advised that if a person or public body does not make an oral submission at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Council of the City of Hamilton before Council approves the zoning bylaw amendments, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision of the Council of the City of Hamilton to the Ontario Municipal Board, and the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the OMB unless, in the opinion of the Board, there are reasonable grounds to do so. Before we get started, we have written comments from Deborah and Glenn Chappell. May I have a motion, please, to receive those that correspondence? Councillor Partridge, Councillor Pearson, all those in favor. Thank you. Also, added comments from Dan Ruth. May I have a motion, please, to receive that correspondence? Councillor Partridge, Councillor Pearson, all those in favor. Thank you. We have registered speakers. Therefore, I suggest we start with the staff presentation and then invite down the members of the public. So we'll start with Edward John, please, to come forward for the staff presentation. Good morning.
Good morning, Chair, members of committee, and members of the public. It's wonderful to see some new and returning faces. The purpose of today's application is to amend the Flamborough zoning bylaw number 90-145-Z in order to permit an agricultural operation with a number of agricultural-related, agro-tourism and accessory uses, including but not limited to an education resource centre, restaurant, accessory retail uses, cidery and related parking. The subject lands are located at 250 Concession 4 Road West. The principal use of the property is to remain dedicated to agricultural production, ranging from livestock, orchards, and crop production. The central portion of the property is currently under crop production today and will continue in this manner. The owners of the site have partnered with Farm Stop Ontario, a provincially and federally supported farm economic development program that educates and encourages full-time farming as an occupation. As can see in the concept plan, there are a number of existing buildings within the north portion of the site clustered together. The central portion of the site is intended for the small allotment style farm start program. And towards the southerly portion, there is currently proposed a small livestock area. As detailed in the report, farmers enrolled in the program would be required to rent those smaller parcels and develop a business plan that details the economic viability of their crop production. These new farmers, in turn, are trained in all aspects of the business, from planting to sale of final product. The ultimate goal is to foster and promote farming as a career, encouraging increased production of food grown by local farmers. These uses are all consistent with the existing zoning regulations and by themselves would not have precipitated a zoning amendment. The purpose of today's application is therefore to include what has been termed an agricultural promotion centre within the existing range of uses permitted in the agricultural zone. The Agricultural Promotion Centre will utilise in part several of the existing farm buildings, as well as other potential structures. The existing and proposed buildings are clustered and located centrally, as shown here. The Agricultural Promotion Centre will contain the accessory retail, education centre, small restaurant, and other agricultural-related uses. Sorry, I'll just take you through some photographs of the existing site. As shown in this photo, the existing farm buildings located centrally. This is the view east across the subject lands towards the existing dwelling that's to accommodate the proposed butcher. This is the view south at Concession 4 Road West, looking down towards the cluster of farm buildings. This is from centrally located within the site, looking south towards Rock Chapel Golf Course. And finally, this is the view west towards the environmentally sensitive area. In evaluating the planning merits of the proposed development, the overriding issue is essentially the scale and nature of the secondary agro-tourism uses. Clear direction is contained in the relevant policy framework, documents that identify that these uses need to support but be secondary to the principal use of the land, that of agricultural production. A secondary relationship would exist between the Agricultural Promotion Centre and the working farm. The focus on education is shared both with the new farmers and for the visitors to the area. The education will seek to promote both directly with the new farmers and indirectly with the visitors the role of farming in Ontario. The crops produced will be sold partly on site, providing continued financial sustainability for those farmers, as well as prepared in the tasting kitchen in order to highlight the role and diversity of locally grown foods. This is considered an appropriate diversification, which, provided the scale of the operation is controlled and limited through the amending bylaw, would satisfy the requirements of the use to remain secondary. The uses would be limited in GFA, would be clustered within the site, and this would apply to the use as a whole, with all buildings associated with the Agricultural Promotion Centre capped at a maximum of 1,600 metres squared. The bylaw further restricts individual uses, with the restaurant and the retail uses being limited to 500 and 450 metres squared respectively. This would serve to ensure that the majority of the lands continue to be utilised for agricultural production. The bylaw would also require the secondary uses to be permitted only accessory to an operational farm and not as uses independent of the farm operation. Staff are of the opinion, based on a thorough review of all applicable policies, that the range of uses proposed would satisfy the intent and focus of the prevailing policy framework. Through the public consultation, staff received 2 letters stating concerns over traffic, livestock, ecological impact, land values, and noise. In addition, a number of comments and concerns were raised to the neighbourhood meeting, and it's understood that to date, an additional 2 letters have come forward. With regard to the issue of livestock, it should be noted that the proposal would not amend any existing provision or land use with respect to the housing of livestock. The applicant will therefore be required to comply with all zoning provisions, including the minimum distance separation requirements. With respect to traffic and parking, staff are satisfied that the development would function safely and without adverse impact. With respect to land values, staff is not aware of any empirical evidence to the contrary that this development would have any detrimental impact on the value of land. And finally, servicing, as discussed within the report, staff are satisfied that sustainable services will be provided, subject to additional and detailed information secured through the holding provision. Given the scale of the services, approval of the system ultimately rests with the Ministry of the Environment, who are supportive of the development, subject to the application of a holding for the final information. In conclusion, the proposal can be supported as it is consistent with the provincial policy statement, conforms to the Greenbelt Plan, the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, and implements the agricultural designation of the Rural Hamilton Official Plan. It is a form of agricultural development that promotes the industry in an appropriate and sustainable manner. That concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Councillor Partridge, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And Edward, thank you for the presentation. And I do have a few questions. Now, we know that there are letters that have been received. I've spoken with some of the residents who live in the area, and everybody is generally supportive of this particular project, but there are some areas of concern. I will have 2 amendments that I'm going to put forward, which you and I have discussed after, when it's appropriate, Madam Chair. But there are some questions here. One of them is around the traffic. Now, concession 4 is a corduroy road, so it is not a paved road. I mean, it is a paved road, but it is a corduroy road which started back in the 1800s with basically with the wetlands there. They just knocked down trees and laid the trees down, and that became the road. And then it's been added to year over year. And now, then we get into, I think it was maybe the 50s or 60s, and it got to be paved. So the concern is about the traffic that is going to be on that road. And my question to you is, was there a traffic study done or any kind of a study concerning the fact that that section of concession 4 is a corduroy road? Through you, Madam Chair.
Edward?
Through the chair to the councillor, the application was circulated through the formal consultation to our corridor management team. They did not identify the requirement for a traffic impact study. Based on the condition of concession 4, there was no information in terms of its structural ability to accommodate the traffic, but certainly given the infrastructure in place, they were satisfied that no traffic impact study was required.
All right, thank you. I
Councillor?
appreciate that. Now, but sticking with that traffic issue, it's my understanding that the Agricultural Promotion Centre is the intent for it to be a banquet center, which some of the residents are getting the impression?
Edward?
Through the chair to the councillor, it will be a place of assembly. Through the planning justification report, there was clearly the focus that this would be the area for which agricultural promotion will take place, both from an education and event standpoint. From the purposes of the bylaw, it would not restrict weddings and other events being accommodated on the site, but certainly the focus of the Agricultural Promotion Centre and the larger area is for that. As you notice, through the bylaw, there was that concern that this would morph into something beyond what should be the principal use of the land for agriculture. So there have been restrictions both in the gross floor area and the individual uses and how large they can become. And that was the intent in which to try and restrict this to the intent of the overall planning application.
All right,
Councillor?
Thank you, Edward. And through you, Madam Chair, but the bylaw really is silent in terms of actually identifying whether weddings would be allowed. One of the residents did bring to my attention that before this application, which is before us today, even got to this table, there has been a wedding that was held back in August or September with 300 people there, apparently. And so, the concern is that the bylaw is really silent on that particular use. Is that correct?
Edward?
Through the chair to the councillor, that's correct.
All right, thank you. So I will be bringing an amendment forward on that to address that particular issue for the residents. Now, some of the other comments that were made as well had to do with the location of the buildings. Could you please go back to the slide that shows the layout? Show the different buildings. That's it, right there. Yeah. And I had quite a long conversation with the folks who own Rock Chapel, and I believe they're here to speak today as well. But one of their big concerns is the location of a livestock barn being at the south end of the property, which is very close to their property line, and the ensuing runoff from the livestock into their ponds, which are located close to that edge, and that's what they use to water the golf course. And I'm just wondering, you know, it specifically says within the report that all the buildings are to be clustered at the north end, where all those buildings are, ensuring access to the fourth concession. And why would we then allow the building for livestock to be at the south end? Because that doesn't seem to make sense to me.
Through the chair to the councillor, the clustering of the buildings are in relation to the agricultural promotion uses.
Right.
The livestock barn itself is a use permitted within the existing zoning.
Right.
Through the review of the application, we received information on the amount of livestock that is to be housed at that. Based on the numbers that we were provided, we did run a minimum distance separation review, and the location does pass that requirement in terms of the provisions. They are a modest amount of animals. I think it was 12 pigs, 12 goats, and 24 chickens. So it was, you know, relatively minor in terms of the amount of livestock, but certainly there would be an opportunity to relocate the livestock based on those numbers within the site.
All right, and thank you for that, because it's my understanding through you, Chair, as well, that that livestock barn should be or could be moved to be included within that cluster, so that there's nothing to stop them from having more animals and from growing the size of this operation. I think the whole intent for it to be successful. And don't get me wrong by my comments. I love the concept of it, the whole earth to table concept. But I think the devil is in the details in terms of how we assemble the buildings and where we allow manure, for instance, to be piled. If it's going to be at the south end of the building, there's going to be issues with runoff into the streams that run through that property. Is that correct?
Through the chair to the councillor, when we did our MDS review, we assumed that the manure storage would be in close proximity to the livestock barn.
Right, okay, so that answers my question, yes, then. And I will be bringing an amendment forward to address that as well. And I guess the other two other issues I'd like to address, Madam Chair, through you. One is the MNR. The MNR is supportive. However, they do have some issues. Can you speak to what those issues are?
Edward?
Through the chair, are you discussing the Conservation Authority comments, or in particular the MNR?
Particularly the MNR. They're responsible for the permit to take water, is my understanding. And through you, Madam Chair, this particular operation will be using more than 10,000 liters per day. And so, you know, were there concerns around that with the MNR and the hydrogeological study?
Through the chair to the council, the Ministry of the Environment will be reviewing the permit to take water, because, as you're correct, it is beyond the 10,000 litres per day. I've had extensive discussions with members of the MOE who are reviewing the application. We came to a conclusion that a holding provision would be satisfactory given the amount of detail that they have received to date. So they are of the opinion that certainly the site can be serviced sustainably. What they're after is some final information just in terms of numbers and scale, and once again plugging those into the final proposed development. So they were the ones who came forward and suggested that the holding provision would be an appropriate tool in which to safeguard the requirement of the final amount of information.
Councillor?
All right. And thank you. I should have said MOE, not MNR.
Good to see you caught me out there, so.
But thank you for that. And I guess, yes, it was a test, thank you, yeah. Yeah, I think he passed, yeah. And through you, Madam Chair, I guess the other concern that has been raised, and again, the residents are supportive of this. I held a meeting on September 23rd back in, I think it was 2013. The applicant was more than agreeable to do a presentation. Their agent presented. We had, I think, about 60 people in attendance. You were in attendance at that meeting. And, you know, the concern that was raised was that the intent was to make it primarily a banquet center. And clearly, the agent that presented at the time said that there was no intent for there to be events and for this to be a banquet center around anything more than an agriculture promotional center, an education center, if you would. So, you know, that was a discussion that was, through you, Madam Chair, it was high on the radar for the people who attended that, public meeting. But generally speaking, for what they want to do in terms of the community gardens, the training, the earth to table, that whole operation, there was support of that. So my, I guess, question to you is, the agricultural promotional center is being allowed at this point as a secondary use to the main operation, which would be growing crops, doing the educational requirements with farmers, and you know, having a minimal amount of livestock there. But is there there's nothing to stop them from having weddings. So if they had weddings every weekend, or even if they had 20 or 30, does that then become more of a primary use as opposed to, it's supposed to be as a secondary use? Like, where is the line for that?
Through the chair to the councillor, clearly you've hit the heart of the matter. This is the principal issue that we've struggled through this application, understanding the clear merits with respect to promoting agriculture, promoting the growth of local crops and the financial sustainability. In terms of the planning approach, it was decided that in terms of limiting the scale and ensuring that those uses are tied to the principal use, which would be agriculture, so those uses couldn't exist in isolation. They would have to demonstrate that the lands are obviously being farmed and that there is no increase in terms of the scale of the agricultural promotion uses. But certainly that was the principal concern as you evaluated the application through the prevailing policy framework, was to ensure it remains secondary and complementary to that agricultural use.
Okay,
Councillor?
thank you. So through you, Madam Chair, I'm pleased that that was also a concern raised by staff, but we still need to address it a bit more thoroughly. Those are my questions.
Okay.
Residents are going to be speaking, and I'll have some more questions for them. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. And Edward, my question is, you showed pictures through there of existing buildings. So on this here, can you point out exactly what are the existing buildings that are on the site now?
Apologies. So it'd be useful to go back and forth between the location plan
Oh, okay. If you want to do that,
and
that's fine.
the cluster of buildings that exist. So maybe I'll use the mouse because I can't find the clicker. But so most of the shots I took were from this kind of courtyard area. And they looked in all directions. These buildings here are actually hoop houses, so they're not formal structures in that sense. They are dedicated to the growing of crops. The principal building would be the building here located centrally, which is, you know, what would be the banquet hall or the main area in which to have the educational programs presented. In this location here, we have that dwelling that I showed in the slides, which is intended to accommodate the butcher. And then there are some smaller retail buildings here. So I'll just go through the slides. Maybe you can gauge some of the character and exact location of those buildings. So once again, this would be me standing in that formal courtyard area looking east, and that would be where they're proposing to put that butcher. This would be the principal centrally located building. I do understand that they are going to be changing and repurposing certain portions of the building. They may not exist in this form, but that's where the location is intended to go. Once again, this is standing centrally in that courtyard looking at that principal building. hopefully that's kind of giving you a bird's eye view of where we are in terms of the existing farm buildings and, the requirement that they will be adding on, making additions to, just in order to accommodate the range of uses, but certainly they're trying to make use of what's there existing today and then keep the built form and the area dedicated to buildings in the same location, save and except the livestock area.
The livestock, the barn will be completely new at the southerly end. That would be a whole new
Through the
building.
chair to the councillor, correct.
Is that a pond that's just beside there also?
Yeah, I believe that would be an irrigation pond.
And my other question, I just want to be sure, is understanding the issues today with regards to the uses, as the banquet hall, the weddings proposed, whatever. Is there any difference to this use here to, say, a winery, a vineyard where they hold weddings, or the golf courses, other than the use of golf course just being as sport?
Through the chair to the councillor, certainly that preyed on my mind when I was reviewing this application. Clearly, it's not unforeseen to have restaurants, obviously, in golf courses or on vineyards, and it's certainly a desirable location to have weddings. On a similar vein, this application is proposing not to exclude that option, as clearly it has the buildings and the means. Once again, it all comes down to ensuring that it's secondary and doesn't become that principal use, so it's a scale issue. And obviously the retention of the farming.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Collins, if you can, or Councillor Pearson, if you can take the chair just for a second. I have a few questions as well. The buildings that you just showed us that are existing buildings, you pointed to the 4 on the side, that's greenhouses. You have to remember the copy we have in our staff report is very blurry, so I can appreciate the former questions. The building on the right of the main laneway was that the beautiful little home cabin that you showed us. The main part now, is that where the weddings have been held in the past?
Through the chair to the councillor, I don't know of those weddings when they occurred, but I would presume that's really the only building functional on site that could accommodate a wedding, so yes, to that question.
Thank you for that. And the existing barn, now I'm not a full-fledged farm girl, but it looked like it was a former livestock barn. Is that true?
Through the councillor, through the chair to the councillor, I'm not aware of it housing livestock in the immediate past. Certainly when I was on site, it clearly had been upgraded and was not containing any livestock.
Okay. And Mr. John, when I was reading this staff report, Puttycombe Farms came to mind. They are agricultural tourism. They have a restaurant on site. They have wine tasting. They have a patio. They have a very small room upstairs, but it's for gatherings. So if you can just clarify one more time, what's the difference between this and, say, the winery that already exists out there that does the same thing that they're asking?
Through the chair to the councillor, I mean, there are many similarities in terms of the range of uses that you suggested. I think what's different about this application is that clearly there's an intent to have that education resource center on site. So it's beyond just accessory with that a retail or restaurant may serve as a function. I think the intent inherent in terms of what they're trying to achieve here is a building that can have, school children come and see firsthand and go through that educational component, as well as agricultural functions on site. I would argue that, the vineyards have that restaurant as an accessory use. I think this is trying to be more integrated in terms of promoting the education of the agricultural community.
Thank you for that clarification. In here, it's asking that they put agricultural-related accessory uses, including, and you said restaurant. You also mentioned a kitchen. Is that going to be one and the same, or is that going to be two separate events?
Through the
Two
chair to the
separate
council, it
buildings?
would be restricted under the same. It would be a tasting kitchen, so it would be the kitchen in which they prepared the food for the restaurant.
Okay, and, all right. And for the restaurant, is there any plans as to what the capacity of seating is that?
Through the chair to the councillor, they will be required to obviously demonstrate, fire prevention and building code requirements. From the purpose of the bylaw, it's restricted in the GFA, so the gross floor area of 500
Right.
square meters. At this point, it's not clear at what the capacity would ultimately be. They will have sufficient parking on site to accommodate the numbers, but you know, the decision to choose 500 square meters is because that's typically a smaller restaurant size for an area. Throughout Hamilton, 450 square meters is typically the threshold in which parking kicks in for commercial uses, particularly restaurants. So it's just considered in terms of a GFA amount to represent on the smaller scale.
And GFA, sir, is?
Through the chair to the councillor, I apologize, gross floor area.
Okay, gross floor area is 500 square meters. You know you have enough parking for 500 square meters, but we're not unsure of what the seating capacity is.
Through the chair to the councillor, it is yet to be determined.
Okay. All right, those are my questions for now. Thank you, and we'll wait for the residents as well. Councillor Partridge, second time. Oh, sorry, thank you.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And that just spurred on two questions that I neglected to ask. So the actual footprint of the restaurant has been reduced, as I understand, down to 500 square meters. So it's a smaller restaurant as opposed to a larger facility, right?
Through the chair to the councillor, through the review of the application, we've specifically gone and reduced certain gross floor areas in order to achieve that intent of keeping it small scale. So yes, from what they proposed to what we have in front of us today, it has been amended with specific restrictions on certain types of uses, as well as an overall reduction in the area dedicated to the agricultural promotion centre, as it's been termed.
Right, but the Agriculture Promotion Centre is a bigger area. It is not within that 500 square meters.
Through the chair to the councillor, the 500 square meters would be a component of that overall 1,600.
Right, so we're really looking at 1,600 square meters is the overall, the total, right?
The total.
Size. All right. And my last question, Madam Chair, through you, how many parking spots have we allowed for at this facility?
So through the amended bylaw, I believe I provided the requirement for them to, I think it was 68. They showed on site in terms of the concept plan a lot more parking spaces. And I think the overall concern was to minimize the area dedicated to parking. So through the site plan process, we'll look at potential options to have more informal parking areas, so gravel instead of a lot of hard paved areas. And then obviously not providing as much land lost to parking in the area in itself. So we've reduced the requirement that they've proposed, and we'll, through the site plan process, ensure that we minimize whatever land is lost to parking.
All right, thank you. So it's 68 parking spots?
I believe so.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for staff? May I have a motion, please, to receive the staff presentation? Councillor Collins, Councillor Johnson, all those in favor? Carried, thank you. I'll now call upon the agent Kristen Barrisdale of GPS Group for their presentation, please.
Good afternoon.
Good morning. I hope I said your name right. If not,
Yes.
please reintroduce yourself.
Kristen Barrisdale from GSP Group. We are the agents acting on behalf of Landmark Group, the owners of the property. I'm just going to go through a brief presentation just to highlight what the purpose of the Earth to Table Farm and Agricultural Promotion Center is, and to give you a bit of background as to who Landmark Group is. So Landmark Group, the registered owners of the property, they are the proprietors of the Ancaster Mill, the Cambridge Mill, Spencer's on the Water in Burlington, Laura Mill, Whistle Bear Golf Club, and the Bread Bar in Hamilton, as well as Guelph. They have a visionary strategy of restoring landmarks in Southern Ontario to their former architectural glory by creating destinations for world-class hospitality with the finest foods of the season. So here's a map showing their different facilities. They're essentially located in southwestern Ontario and the western portion of the GTA. Landmark Group is a big proponent of the earth-to-table concept, or the philosophy. The intended chef and one of the operators of this Agricultural Resource Center is Jeff Crump. He published the Earth to Table Seasonal Recipes from Organic Farm in 2009. And the intent of that cookbook is to inspire local and sustainable food development, preparation, and enjoyment. So the intent of the Earth to Table Farm and Agricultural Promotion Center is to essentially put that book into practice. They want to put into practice the philosophy that understanding where food comes from and how to cook food in a more conscientious fashion can result in health and enjoyment benefits. The Earth to Table Farm and Agricultural Promotion Center is intended to be a place for people to learn and experience the Earth to Table philosophy of food production, cooking, and enjoyment. So as you saw previously, here's an air photo of the site and the attended proposed development concept that accompanied the application. The Farm and Agricultural Promotion Center is intended to include the wetland that exists along the northern edge of the property, orchards along the driveway in the front end of the property, and if you're aware of the site or you've been out there recently, you probably saw the activity over the summer of those trees being planted. Landmark acquired a number of heritage apple types of species and has planted them on the property, which will be in turn used in a cidery that they're intending to eventually build on site. Crop production will be located at the rear of the property. And then it will also supply a small market garden that will be on site. Butcher shop, culinary workshop and studio with a demonstration kitchen, greenhouse farming, a small livestock farm, education and promotion center, and then offices and small retail uses associated with the Agricultural Resource Center. The proposed development is essentially going to be focused within the area that's already disturbed on site, that's already been used for the various agricultural practices that exist. And as Edward mentioned, Landmark has partnered with FarmStart Ontario for the agricultural plots at the rear of the property. So those plots are comprised of 1 and 2 acre lots. The intent of that program is to engage individuals interested in farming and kind of teaching them farming from beginning to end. So how to manage their crops, how to grow their crops, and how to take their crops to sale. The FarmStart program, I think, is about a 2 or 3 year program. So they give them 2 or 3 years to grow the crops on the site, and then after 3 years they go out into the real world, if you will, and start to learn to use agriculture as a way of sustainable career. So this is, the idea behind the Earth to Table Farm is essentially sustainability. So agricultural production, food service and entertainment, education aspect, so we talked about the resource center, and then energy. So using the various energy sources on site, solar, wind, water, to assist with the function of the operation. The purpose or the objectives of the Earth to Table Farm are to bring Earth to Table philosophy to life, to educate the people of the benefits of good food. There is an intent to supply Landmark Group, and there's a number of restaurants with locally grown sustainable food products and meat, to promote the goodness of Ontario-grown farm products and meat, and to support the rural economy. It is my understanding that there were some questions or concerns with regards to weddings on site as well as MDS. Edward spoke to the MDS. Livestock is currently permitted on the site right now, and there has been a number of discussions back and forth with the city as well as the MOE with regards to where that livestock facility is located. As part of the hydrogeological assessment that was done, there was also some additional information required with regards to leaching beds and the storage of outdoor manure to make sure that possible leaching and soaking into the groundwater was eliminated. I understand that there may be an amendment to the bylaw as it exists right now to limit or eliminate the possibility for weddings and to discuss or limit the MDS. And if that is the case, we would request deferral of the application so that we can hopefully try to work with city staff to work through these issues. There's no denying the fact that there is a banquet facility portion of the site, but as Edward spoke, the primarily focus is for agricultural production, agricultural promotion, and that agricultural resource center and banquet facility is secondary. The facility itself is large enough, yes, to accommodate weddings, but it's also large enough to accommodate school groups, corporate events, educational festivals, things like that. So if there's any questions that I could answer, I'd be happy to.
Are there any questions for the speaker, please? Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Kirsten, welcome, and thank you. So my question is, you clearly said at the end there that that the banquet facility is large enough to have the educational events, to have the school children come in, and certainly we're not wanting to stop that because that is farm related and it is agricultural promotion. But the issue is the weddings. So how many weddings would they want to have a year?
Again, the primary intent of the site is not to accommodate weddings. I am aware that there has been one wedding on the site since August, but I think that in itself speaks to the volume of the weddings. I don't think that there is an intent to market this as a venue. I think that they will be catering to people who are very interested in the Earth to Table, the farm itself and the center itself, and those who are, I use the term foodies, who are aware of what this site does and what Earth to Table does and what Landmark does. I'm not 100% certain, but their marketing is not to primarily market this as a wedding venue. Yes, that's a secondary aspect that can be accommodated in the size of the building, but that is not the primary intent.
Councillor?
Okay, and so what do we, thank you, Madam Chair. So what do we say to the residents who attended the public meeting and it was a different agent that did the presentation there? I'm not sure if you yourself were present. But where the residents were told that, no, we would not have a banquet facility to run wedding events, that type of thing. It would be strictly everything you've got listed there, which you've said is your primary focus. Is that correct? Like,
yes.
What would you say to those residents now?
I was part of the team that original application, and we've had ongoing discussions with city staff, and I think that we have been extremely forthcoming with city staff and not hiding the fact that yes, there was the potential for weddings at this facility. I'm uncertain as to what comments were relayed to the public, and it's unfortunate that there was that misunderstanding. I think the facility itself is sized to accommodate. It's always been intended to accommodate this size of events that would include weddings. But again, through discussions with city staff, we've really limited that size in order to kind of heed off staff's concerns that this would eventually become ultimately a destination for weddings and not the primary intent of the Agricultural Resource Centre.
Okay, and thank you for that. But I think you can appreciate and understand that, when there's a public meeting held and the residents hear one thing, and then the next thing that happens before it even comes to planning is that there's a wedding with 300 guests, and there's, going to be limited parking now. But I believe the original request was for 250 to 300 parking spots. And so, there is some concern in the community around that. But through you, Madam Chair, coming to the Ministry of the Environment, you mentioned about the location of the manure and some issues that MOE had with that. Could you just expand on that a little bit further?
Absolutely, through you, Mrs. Chair. We've gone back and forth with the MOE with regards to the hydrogeological assessment that was done on site, and essentially it focused around where water is coming from and the potential for contamination of that water. Two of the main focuses were assessing wells in the neighborhood, not just on this site, but other private wells that were supplying residential water supply, and then assessing how potential contaminants from the agricultural operation, so nitrates that are applied on the soil, or particularly the manure facility, how that can be prevented or possibly eliminated in the future. As part of that information that was provided to the MOE, they required some detailed information as to manure storage. So they are essentially required to put a concrete slab down where the manure is stored to prevent any kind of leaching into the groundwater, and it also has to be covered in order to maintain or order to prevent rain from hitting it and running off. And I understand, and I'm not an agricultural specialist, but I understand that's a pretty standard practice when it comes to these types of facilities. So the MOE essentially required them to prove and provide the information that they would in fact meet those regulations.
Councillor?
All right, thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. And so has that been provided to the MOE?
Yes.
And are they satisfied with that?
Yes, there is still some back and forth, as Edward said, with regards to the groundwater and water taking permits and stuff like that. There will be some confirmation and additional details that will have to be provided as part of a site plan application, where they will actually get into the approval of the facility, but the general information has been provided to them.
All right, thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson, if you can take the chair, please. Through you, Councillor, to Kristen. The MOE's approved certificate of approvals for air, water, and so my understanding is that that C of A needs to be put in place prior to any approvals that the city does. Has that C of A been approved by the MOE yet?
No.
Thank you. Those are my questions. I'll take back the chair. Thank you very much. May I have a motion, please, to receive Kristen's, Councillor Pearson.
Sorry, Madam Chair, just to that question, I just want to clarify, maybe through yourself, would the MOE provide that certificate before rezoning approval?
She can't answer.
The zoning approval will be put in place, but there will be a holding provision that will be put on site, and probably Edward is better to answer this, but I think it would prevent any future significant development on the site. So if there was a site plan application, that could not occur until the holding provision is lifted, and the holding provision cannot be lifted until the MOE provides their final approval.
For you, Madam Chair, through to Edward, the certificate of approval that the Vice Chair is mentioning, would that not come after approval of this zoning?
Through the chair to the councillor, the holding provision would restrict any uses permitted through the ballot to be implemented until such point as that information has been submitted to the MOE and approved to their standards.
Right.
So there would be no permissions regarding the Agricultural Promotion Centre until that point.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Councillor Pasuda.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Did I hear you say
It's our understanding, through you, Madam Chair, it's our understanding that there may be a motion put on to amend the bylaw to exclude the wedding component, and we would like the opportunity through deferral to continue to work with staff. Landmark does not want to see that provision be eliminated completely, but is agreeable to having some discussions as to how we can further refine it to provide a comfort level for residents.
Thank you, Kristen. Before you go, I just want to clarify with staff first, this is a public meeting on this application. If it gets tabled and some tweaking is done and it comes back to this committee with the provision to add wedding, does the public meeting now become null and void, or do we recreate a new one? My understanding is this is a public meeting. Once we close off the public meeting, we can't have another one on the same application. So therefore, if we table this today, the public cannot have the opportunity to come back and respond to whatever tweaking is going on after this is done.
through you, or to you, Madam Chairman, if the committee closes the public meeting, then the public meeting component of this, for this application, is done. However, clerks will notify those people who spoke today or attended today or wish to be notified when this matter comes back, so that they have an opportunity then to be at the committee's meeting when this matter comes back. And it'll be at the discretion of committee if they wish to waive the rules to allow anybody to speak that wants to speak when the matter comes back. Alternatively, it depends also on the direction, what comes out of this. But if they've asked them that it just be deferred, then this matter could come back to committee with a new staff recommendation or amendments on the basis of those discussions, depending on why it's being, if it's just being deferred, or if it's being deferred with the direction to staff to have those discussions with the ward councillor and the applicant based on any proposed changes to the bylaw to restrict the range of uses. There is a provision in the Planning Act that requires that Planning Committee and Council satisfy themselves that if there's any changes to the bylaw, that there's no need for any further public meetings or consultation on those changes. So that's the other component. So it all really, there's a bunch of scenarios coming out, but generally our practice is once you close the public meeting is done, and we don't reopen the public meeting when this matter would come back.
Thank you for that. And Mike, you want to add to that?
The only thing I would add, Madam Chair, is that the Planning Act it says you have a minimum of one public meeting. There's nothing preventing you from having a second public meeting if you want one.
Thank you. That's where I was headed for, because I want the committee to be understanding that if we refer it, we table it, or postpone it, we have the option to hold another public meeting to this if there's any tweaking that's done, because my understanding is a contentious issue in this is based on the banquet hall. So if the banquet hall is now allowed, that therefore changes. I just want to clarify that for our committee members, that we can close this public meeting, but we can also request another one to come forward to the new application. So you're the speaker and the agent. We just wanted to put that on record for you as well. Okay, thank you. Thank you, and can I have a motion, please, to receive the presentation? Councillor Partridge, Councillor Pearson, all those in favour. Thank you. We're now going to hear from the public, and we have a registered speakers right now. We'll hear from the registered speakers, and then I'll call out for anyone else in the audience who would like to speak to it. So registered speakers right now is Diana and Paul. Is it Cannell? I don't want to mispronounce the name. I know you've registered. Could you please announce your names, because I'm just horrible at this.
I'm Paul Kennel, and this is my wife, Diane Kennel.
Thank you. And you live at 167 Highway 5 West, correct?
That's correct. We own
Thank you.
Yeah.
This is definitely outside of my comfort zone. I didn't realize there was going to be so many people here. My comments will be... my comments will be about 10 to 15 minutes long, assuming I don't faint before then. Don't stand so close to me. Okay. Hello, thank you for the opportunity to address this committee, and I really appreciate all the thoughtful questions that were asked up till this point. My name is Diana Kennel. My husband, Paul Kennel, and I are the owners of Rock Chapel Golf Centre, which is the property directly south of the proposed Earth to Table landmark development. At Rock Chapel Golf Centre, we celebrated our 20th year in business this past year. We are a seasonal business that is open from April to October. Our award-winning facility includes a 9-hole golf course, an aqua driving range, and a unique 18-hole real grass putting course, which was first of its kind in Canada and remains the only one in Ontario. We are a proud 3-generation family-run small business. At the height of the summer season, we also employ about 30 people, most of whom are students, without using any government money. In fact, over the 20 years, we have provided jobs to over 150 different students, as well as many adult positions, and working an awful lot ourselves as well. Our facility is very friendly and family-oriented. Our customers range from ages 2 to 92. Each year, we also teach golf to over 450 kids through our very popular junior clinics and summer golf camps. In addition, we have a small cafe with patio that provides food and beverages to our golfing customers. Rock Chapel is our only business and source of income for Paul and I and our 3 children. The property has been in our family since 1975. The land was farmed, and my father-in-law, Albert, also had a landscaping business that my husband was involved in. My mother-in-law, Maria, ran an antique market for 20 years on the property until her passing 6 years ago. Even today, Albert, at age 84, has a half-acre fruit and vegetable garden behind the farmhouse he lives in, with a hoop house where he grows vegetables year-round. He grows a third for himself, a third for friends and family, and a third to donate to the Good Shepherd. Albert grew up on a family farm as one of 13 kids in Switzerland, where he also studied farming at a post-secondary level before he immigrated to Canada in the 1950s. In about 1990, the city and the region appropriated the front part of our property to build a floodplain for the Borers Creek, the larger of 2 creeks that run through our property, to protect Dundas from the rain runoff for the anticipated development of Waterdown we see happening today. It is an enormous area that was dug out along the full length of our property to create the floodplain, and the excavated dirt was put on the northeast quadrant of our property. Anybody familiar with the area, I don't know if you've seen when we have, it was supposed to protect against Hurricane Hazel type events that really did a lot of damage at the time, and we were under the impression that this flooding wouldn't happen that often, but with the development of Waterdown, not sure anyone's driven by when literally our entire facility is under how many feet of water? A lot of water, like the flags are just ticking out at the top. So it's been a considerably used floodplain, for lack of a better description. Anyway, after the massive project, only a small portion at the northwest quadrant remained suitable for farming, which is still farmed today. Not wanting to leave so much of the property unproductive, Albert and Paul came up with the idea of building a golf course. Even though neither were golfers, they saw it as a big landscaping project that the community would be able to enjoy playing. As we struggled for over 5 years and used what was a lot of money for us to get the necessary approvals, despite having the city and region being on board with the plan, the Ministry of Food and Agriculture continued to put up opposition despite the tremendous damage done to most of our property and limited farmland remaining. One of the reasons was a small sliver of land that was within the minimum distance separation from a former livestock barn on our neighbor's property, even though our neighbor was fully approved with what we were proposing and hadn't had pigs in over 20 years. Anyway, at what was to be the final meeting, and looking like we would be left with nothing for all of our effort and expense, my husband thought of the idea to ask, what about building the golf course on the front of the property in the floodplain? No matter what, that wasn't an area that could be farmed anymore. They took away that request and ultimately approved it. This location was going to provide more ongoing challenges for us than we could know in the future than building on the other area which we had originally requested, but at least it was something we could move forward with, and so Rock Chapel Golf Center, as you see it today, came to be. Every last part of the golf center was built through the manpower, hard work, and landscaping talent of Albert and Paul. It has and continues to be a tremendous amount of work, but also of satisfaction to see the beauty of our facility and the enjoyment families have spending time together at our place. So that is a little about the history of our time on the property. Now to address the reasons we want to present to this committee today. We have had a chance to review both the staff report and the application itself. We really hope we can come to a satisfactory resolution to our serious concerns so that we can be supportive of the landmark development. We have come up with options for solutions to the problem as well. First, let's address the problem. I can't tell you enough how worried we are about the placement of the livestock barn, manure pile, and compost in the headwater area of the Rock Chapel Creek at the back of the property. I couldn't bring a PowerPoint today because my son, that's very well versed, has 2 exams today, and I have no idea how to do this stuff. On the city's pictures there, maybe at some point we can...
We can get that picture up for you if you'd like, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay. Mr. John, would you help us out, please? That way you can point and show us the way.
Yeah, well, that's what we'll do.
Do you want the aerial photo?
Yeah, the one that's green, yeah.
One that's green.
Yeah,
The real picture, yeah.
the aerial. That's
The real picture, that
no,
one?
the real picture, so the next...
No, the aerial photo, please.
The next one, that one.
There it is.
So you can see the creek, that's the headwater of the creek down the middle there, and all those lines going towards it shows how all the runoff goes towards that creek. And it actually comes from the neighbor's property as well. You can see that diagonal line. So it really brings in, all that land is sloped down because a farmer's field wants to be well drained. The crops grow better. So whether that was by nature or by...
That's right. That's right. That's the creek there. That's right.
That's the creek. And then it comes down to our property down there. So all that land at the back, not just within 30 meters of the creek, all of that land and any rain that falls on it traverses, and you know rain, you have a flood-worthy basement, you can't stop it with a fence or anything. It's all coming down towards that area.
That's right. We're right
Through the
here.
chair,
We're
please.
Right there.
No worries.
Okay. Back to my extensive speech. This creek comes down from their property and flows across our golf course and into a provides us 100% of the water we use for irrigation. The impact on water quality, especially E. coli contamination, will seriously impact the health and well-being of our customers, staff, and family, and both the short-term and long-term viability of our business. It is important to note that this concern was mentioned as an induced impact in the environmental impact study. I heard the person from the group saying that the bore holes and addressing the well quality, but I didn't really hear much spoken of rain runoff. That is what we're more concerned, well, we're concerned about both, but what I'm going to discuss next is that rain runoff. It doesn't filter through the land. It literally grabs the contaminants from the surface, draws them down to the creek, and then comes directly onto our property. It is because of the high level of intensification proposed at the front of the property that the livestock barn is being moved from its normal farming location in the existing two-story barn to a new proposed barn at the back of the property. The property has significant grade change north to south, as outlined in the application, with all the surrounding land draining towards this creek and then coming down towards our land. Given the slope of the area, we know a vegetation buffer and fence will not stop the rain runoff from entering the creek. Summertime thunderstorms bring a lot of water onto the land, which drains down to the creek, raising the level of the creek dramatically. Since the creek crosses our 6th fairway, many of our customers, including children, often, at the expense of pace of play, I can assure you, go looking for lost balls in the creek and they come into contact with the water. We have many children and adults as well at our facility, unlike maybe other golf courses, that enjoy sitting on the grass at various places, which is irrigated with this water. In our golf camps, the kids sit on the lawn. On our driving range, there's berms behind it where whole families will come. You know, they'll take turns hitting balls and sit up on the grass there. It's not just... In fact, we don't really have very many. We have 6 golf carts. We don't have a fleet of golf courts where people are sitting with their beer. We don't have drinking on our course because it is a family facility. People sit on our grass. We even have a little playground my mother-in-law had put in when she had an antique market that we still have there, and families like to literally picnic on the grass. So there's so many opportunities for them to come into contact with the pathogens. Additionally, the well water that supplies the farmhouse where Albert lives, as well as the water for our cafe, can be affected. Just from the existing farming activity in the area, we already, although occasionally, get a positive reading in our well. Thankfully, at this point, it is fairly infrequent, but when it happens, it can cause instant problems for our cafe, and if not resolved, can shut it down. We know that E. coli contamination is always possible when animal effluent is present. Adding a livestock barn so close to our property will definitely increase the occurrences of E. coli contamination of our well, which is a real and significant danger to our customers, staff, and family. As I said earlier, we came prepared to offer a couple of solutions that would be acceptable to us. Our preferred solution is that the amendment include a provision to not allow livestock on the property. Although this is normally an allowed part of a farming operation, given the extremely high level of intensification proposed at the front of the property, which will certainly, by the way, undermine the future of family-run markets in the neighborhood, such as the Dutch Mill Country Market and Diamonds Farm and Market, since it will include a fruit, herb, and vegetable market, butcher shop, cidery, culinary school, restaurant, education promotion center, assembly facility, bakery, coffee shop, snack bar, crafts and gift shop, flower and plants shops, parking, it said, for 340 cars, plus buses and a large tile bed. This power center type of corporate farm development places way too high of a demand on the capacity of the property, then requiring the livestock barn to be placed in the vulnerable headwaters area of the Rock Chapel Creek. The staff report itself discusses its concerns over the scale of the development proposed. It references similar developments in the Niagara and surrounding regions as justification, but what it fails to note is that these wineries do not include livestock. With everything being proposed on this one site, it will create a level of intensification that will be more like the 100-meter diet as opposed to the 100-mile diet being espoused. Just too much in one place and taken as a whole may be in violation of Section 2.3.3.1 of the provincial policy statement, which says that new secondary uses shall be limited in scale. We have put together a list of 16 farms raising organic meat and eggs within a 15-mile radius, with a number of them actually less than 5 miles away, where the applicant can source organic meat and eggs for their butcher shop. Again, we all want you to understand that we profoundly feel that this is the best option, and we have to believe that the applicant wants to be a good neighbor with us and do just this one small thing to foster a good relationship with us so that we can all continue to have success with our businesses. To show we are serious about being open to further compromise, we have come up with another option that we feel we could accept the level of risk it entails. We would be agreeable with the applicant limiting buildings and barns to the front of the property only and using the existing barn at the front of the property for livestock, as this is well away from the creek area and would hopefully lower the risk of E. coli contamination. Historically, this is where livestock would have been on this farm. This option would also move the risk of livestock smell away from our property, where it would definitely affect our golfers' experience, especially the young and women golfers, and puts it back where it belongs as part of an authentic farm experience. The manure and compost pile location needs to be moved further north, away from our property line, and kept away from the same headwaters area of the creek. The manure pile poses the same contamination risk being anywhere near the creek as the barn does. To draw from golf terminology, it is poor etiquette to have it along our property line. Our compost pile is behind our barn in the middle of our property, as far away from all neighbors as possible. To be good neighbors, they need to do the same. Given the educational premise of this development, wouldn't it be an educational opportunity to show how composting works by centralizing the compost area where visitors can more easily view it, since it plays such an integral part of organic farming, which is the standard this development is promoting? By moving the compost and manure pile, all neighbors are protected and an educational opportunity is created. In addition, any odors again contribute to an authentic farm experience as opposed to downloading that to their neighbors. The benefit of this combined option is that rain runoff from the barn, manure, and compost piles will be captured by their proposed irrigation pond. The pond would need to be large enough so that we can be sure that no overflow occurs, even during the heaviest of rains, to prevent sending contaminants down to us. This should provide some measure of protection for our water quality by significantly increasing the distance away from the creek, and also allow us the future potential for our vacant land at the back of our property. That was the area where the region had dumped all the floodplain fill onto. By providing us a reasonable distance separation from our property line. When Mr. John was talking about the distance separation, we're not clear if the calculations have been done from our existing golf operations versus from our property line. We would like to make sure the minimum distance separation area line is done from our property line. We encountered, as I said earlier, a lot of problems during when we originally tried to get rezoning, with just the tiniest sliver being on our property stopped the whole kit and caboodle. So we're very aware of that. Our son is in first year at Niagara College studying business golf management, and he got a scholarship too, where he will also get his CPGA golf instructor certification. He really wanted to be here today, but he has 2 exams. Once he graduates and starts to take on a bigger role together with us, we want to have the possibility to grow the golf education and instruction aspect of our business on this land, so having more than enough to cover the minimum distance separation required is also very important to supporting, including this 3rd generation in our business. We would like the committee to know that recreational-based uses of our land is fully supported by the same provincial policy statement and Greenbelt legislation mentioned in the applicant's report, and that this legislation states that recreational uses should be promoted. We understand that this new development carries a lot of political excitement for the city and the province, but it is very important that it doesn't come at our expense. We have already dealt with more than our fair share trying to recoup a living from our land with the floodplain put on our property. Please do the right thing and help us protect our family's future and the enjoyment our customers have of our property. Thank you so very much for listening.
Thank you, Kristen. You did a great job, and your counselor has some questions for you. Please just stay where you are.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Chair, and Diana, Paul, you did excellent. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
If I'm to kind of recap what your key issues are, it's the location of the barn,
Yes.
location of the manure.
Yep.
I think primarily it is the runoff, because the headwaters, which are actually not just in the property north of you, but also in the adjoining properties. So that would all run off into your property.
And you can see, it's really, I mean, almost the whole back half of the property. And, you know, that all those lines are draining down to that creek. And the proposed irrigation pond, I believe, is, well, that is on the other picture, but it's a little bit up from where that, the really dominant part of the creek is.
Yes.
So if those piles are moved north of that, then when the rain runoff, it should be captured by their irrigation pond.
Correct.
The way they've got everything placed now, it's behind the irrigation pond, so their water stays all nice, but it's all sent down to us. And if, you know what, if you're making it, you should keep it. So if it's put on up, well, you know, it's just etiquette, really, and being neighborly, is if it's moved north, you know, we already, you know, we're in a rural area. Sometimes people on their land we use organic fertilizer.
Right.
Occasionally you smell that stuff around, but you know, you try to keep the piles and those kinds of things central on your property.
Thank you, Diana.
You're
And
welcome.
for those of us who live in the country, we can appreciate exactly what you're saying. I do have a question for you, though, through Madam Chair. Where is Albert's property that he farms on your property? Where is it located?
It'd be down here. It's not, and then we
Not on the
do
map?
farm this area here. This is,
He's not talking about the greenhouse.
Oh, you're just talking about-
Yes, so the creek comes down the middle.
Right.
You can sort of see. So that quadrant is where all the material was dumped. But this whole area here is still farmed with crops, corn and soybean.
Okay.
They sort of rotate.
All right.
It's a fairly small area compared to the property as a whole, but
Exactly.
it's not that we wanted to abandon that, it was put upon us.
Right.
With the
But
flood.
the farming, the actual farming that Albert does is in this area, is what I'm hearing.
That's correct, other than his,
Which would be affected by the runoff as well.
we're
So-
not as worried about the crops.
no.
Crops, they're not really impacted.
What happens is
Right.
this creek comes down, then comes along our property, then comes right through our like sixth fairway into
Exactly.
our irrigation pond.
Yes.
And eventually gets into the Boers Creek
And it's not
watershed.
a far distance, like it pretty much comes off and that's all.
And I have been golfing and had to trudge through the water that's on that sixth concession, that sixth hole. I thank you very much for your presentation, and those are my questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Pearson, if you can take the chair for a second, please. Diana, in your presentation, you quoted 2.3.2.1. Is that from the provincial policy statement? Is that from the regional official
Yes,
plan? Is that from the Flamborough secondary plan?
I saw that in their report as the provincial policy
So the
statement.
PPS.
And that it said that new secondary uses shall be limited in scale. And from Mr. John's comments, he was trying to keep each individual thing limited in scale. And what I'm saying with that long list of all those uses is that if you take it as a whole, all the shops I mentioned, this was strictly from their application. I didn't make up all these uses, and apparently weddings may be part of that as well. If you take that as a whole, that's a lot of things in one place, and that's what I'm saying as that Because of so much at the front, I think it's kicked out the barn to make room for all of that to the back of the property. Otherwise, traditionally, I mean, I know we have a similar looking barn on our property. That's where maybe they're saying in recent past there's been no animals, but those barns have been there a very long time. And historically, it was that type of barn where the farm animals would have been kept, where the livestock would have been kept.
Which was my question earlier. Thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you very much. I'll take the chair back now. Thank you. Are there any other questions for our presenters? Seeing none, you did a great job. Thank you very much.
It was my birthday yesterday, and I couldn't enjoy it because I was so nervous about today.
Aww.
But now I feel a bit relieved.
It's okay. It's Councillor Farr's birthday today, and he's not enjoying it either, so that's good.
Happy birthday. Thank you so much again, everybody.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to put this out, and are there any additional members of the public wishing to address the committee? Please come down to the podium, write your name, address, postal code, and telephone number on the sheet prior to speaking. Is there anyone else here that would like to speak? Come on down. Just for housekeeping, is there anyone else here from the public that would like to speak to this issue? Sir, if you just want to wait right there, then when it's your turn, we'll have you come up. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. My name...
Self and your address, please.
Okay. My name is Brad D. I live at 271 Concession 4 West in Waterdown, pretty much right across the street from 250 Concession 4 West. Make no mistake that this is a thinly veiled attempt to mask this operation as good for the community. With their agricultural center, livestock, training, good for the environment, good for farming as a community. The main thing they're running here is a business. And foremost, with the restaurant, resource center, they've had 2 weddings. Not one, they've had 2. And it was very easy to see because there was ribbons and flags and stuff at the end of the driveway. Welcome to our wedding reception. So this thing is going to morph into something that will overwhelm the whole neighborhood. Whether you live on the 4th concession or as the previous people spoke of how it's going to affect their property in an environmental way. The existing buildings they're talking about now, as of the pictures here, most of those have been built in the last 2 or 3 years. Okay, they were not there years ago when this company, Landmark or GSP, bought that. They have been planning this for years. The buildings that they have built are there with the notion of running this as a huge business. Edward Johns even called the main building the banquet hall. Those were his words in his speech. Landmark is a business, and all of their businesses that they owned are all restaurants. This mill, that I think it was there's one in Elmira, Ancaster, etc. Those are all businesses. They're restaurants first and foremost. And you can see that is their primary focus. And it's not agriculture and farming, et cetera, and resource center to have children come in and learn about all this. Don't be fooled by this. This is a huge corporation that is there for one thing. It is to take over that area, turn it into a wedding reception place. They've already had 2. I don't know if that's legal or not, but that's not the point. That is their main focus. They will not let this banquet hall sit empty. It's been built. It's there. It's a very pretty building, blends in with the landscape, but that will be their main money making. And if we as citizens of that, not just on that street, but of that area, do not stop this now, they will continue to fight it and fight it and fight it until their goals are met, and that is profitability at the expense of the neighborhood, expense of the environment, et cetera. Also parking, 68 spots were mentioned by Mr. John. There's nowhere in any of these, that stack of paper that's out there says 68. It says 80 to a maximum of 340. How can there be such a variance from 80 to 340? 340 parking spots. You imagine the traffic on that. This road doesn't even have shoulders. It's a 2-lane, east and west, with a yellow line down the middle. Constantly people, it's already difficult to come off of Highway 6, whether you're going north or southbound, to turn onto Concession 4 West. If you're going to have 340 cars, and if they make it that, if they get that approval, that the traffic, the congestion, the pollution, the noise, also the noise from if they're going to have weddings there. Weddings are not quiet. And they're going to be, they could probably run them all year round, but in the summertime, you are going to hear noise pollution out there. They're running this as a business. The farm thing is just their attempt to mask this as what they truly want to do. I will not rest until this is put to rest, that they do not get this application. I will fight it tooth and nail. I know there's other residents on the street. I will not have a huge corporation change my landscape for the sake of money in their pockets. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. D. If you can just hold for a second, please. Your councillor has some questions for you. Councillor Partridge.
Hello, Brad.
Hi.
Welcome. Thanks for coming in and for saying your piece. Through you, Madam Chair, the two weddings, how many, can you roughly guess how many cars there were?
50, 75. I mean, it's hard to see because that is quite a distance back. They could mask them from coming, can't really, I don't know if I can, no. They would, yeah, that's the main building, there's the road. They could be parking them back behind, for all I know.
Okay. Yeah, and you know, that clearly is a concern of not just yourself, but I have heard it from certainly the residents that were just presenting, but also other residents in the area. And so, you know, what I may do is defer this so that we can address those issues and not have this approved today. Would you be all right with that?
Yes. Please.
All right. Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Colley.
Chair, just one quick question. Where is your land?
I would be almost on the, you see where those, down to the left a bit, down more and more.
Keep going.
Keep going. You see where all those buildings are?
Yes.
I'm almost across the street from that. Actually, no, I'm where the yellow border line
That's
is
right.
here. I'd be right about there. So across the street.
And you have a farm there?
No, I have a residence there.
Residence?
Yep.
How many acres do you have there?
20.
20. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions for the speaker? Seeing none. Oh, motion to receive. Councillor Partridge, Councillor Pearson, all those in favor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, please. You can sign in.
Good morning. My name is Dirk
Morning.
Lammers. I live at 250 4th Concession, right across the road. Our driveways are almost right across.
You introduce yourself, please.
I'm Dirk Lammers.
Sorry?
Dirk Lammers.
Landers. Thank you.
There have been numerous functions there this summer. My concern is that gravel driveway, when they've had those, in this fall, there was 3 functions every Saturday. 3 Saturdays in a row, there was a major function there, numerous cars. We're just eating the dust. Also, another concern of mine is the water. When they did their water test, they monitored my well. It did drop during their test. They wrote in a letter to me the drop in my well was probably due to my livestock. My barns were empty at the time. And I had told them that I would be shipping my birds 3 days before their test. So my barns were empty and my well did drop, not significantly, but it did drop. So.
Thank you. Stay right where you are because your counselor has some questions for you. Counselor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Dirk, thank you very much for coming in. I appreciate it. So you're located, just so everybody can see, right over here, right? Right
Yeah,
across
those are
the
my
road.
barns, my
Right.
poultry barns.
And you have quite a successful chicken operation there.
Yes.
And how many chickens do you raise?
I have a quota for almost 35,000.
Almost 35,000. Okay, so it's a very large operation.
Yes.
And I appreciate that. Have you ever had problems with your well or your water before this?
Never. It's
No?
always tested beautifully. I have a shallow well. I have more than enough water for my chickens. Even when they had their test, it did not adversely affect me,
Right.
but my well did drop.
Okay, so didn't adversely affect you, but your well did drop.
Yes.
Yeah, and it hasn't before that. And you use, do you use a significant amount of water with your operation?
When the birds are fully grown, almost 10,000 liters a day.
Almost 10,000 liters a day, okay. And so the operation that, from the applicant being proposed across the road is going to be more than 10,000 liters a day?
Yes,
Okay.
as far as I understand.
All right, and so if I understand you correctly, then, I mean, these are your key issues are the source water and the potential drop in your well, but also the gravel driveway?
That's right. When they had the function this summer, I know they can't control the speed of their guests. But that, as you see, is a fairly long driveway to their main buildings.
Yep.
And some of the guests, most of them are pretty reasonable, but some of them fly down the driveway. Some of the rendering trucks that are using the driveway twice a week to pick up rendering from their butcher shop,
Right.
fly down their driveway, and it is a concern because most of the time they have tried to minimize it by putting asphalt grindings down and this and that, but sometimes we do eat dust.
Yeah, well, and that's part of living out in the country as well. We can all attest to that.
That's right. And also, the cars are flying down the 4th to go to their place, realize that they've missed their driveway, and they turn around in my driveway.
Yes, I wondered about that. Yeah. All right, thank you very much, Dirk. I appreciate you coming in, and you've actually raised a couple of additional points. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions for the speaker? Seeing none, may I have a motion please to receive? Councillor Partridge, Councillor Farr, all those in favor? Thank you very much for coming, sir. Is there anyone else here, and I'm going to ask 3 times, is there anyone else here in the public that would like to speak? Come on down. Oh, sorry. Good thing you're not at an auction, you would have bought something. Is there anyone else here that would like to speak to, let's get this straight. Application for the amendment of Flamborough bylaw number 90145Z on 250 concession for Road West in Flamborough. That's once. Anyone else here that would wish to speak to item 6.4? That's twice. And here's a 3rd time. Anyone here from the public who would like to speak to this issue? Thank you. So now we've heard from the public, and there's a motion here to close the public meeting. So Councillor Partridge, what are your wishes at this point?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And, you know, I think everyone has heard that on one hand, this sounds like a wonderful, certainly operation and, you know, good agricultural promotion, but there are some significant concerns in the community that I just don't feel that they have been addressed. So I would like to defer this application with the direction to have staff and the applicant work with the ward councillor, which quite honestly, it would have been nice if it had happened before this meeting. But I would like to move that motion to address the issues that have been raised by the applicants.
Thank you. And before we do that, if I don't mind, what is the wish of this committee about the public meeting? Do you want to close this public meeting and then reissue a new public meeting for the time it comes back if your motion carries? Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you. I would like to keep it that we could have it as the public meeting kept open until the next meeting to allow for further comment, please.
And just for clarification, Mr. Robichaud, the wish of the ward councillor is to keep the public meeting open until this comes back, if it's supported to be deferred. If it comes back, then the public meeting remains open and we close it at that time after everyone's had their say. Mr. Robichaud.
Through you, Madam Chairman, that is fine, because the committee has the
Okay.
choice whether they wish to close the public meeting or not. And then I assume there'd be a friendly direction to staff to give notice when it comes back in accordance with the Planning Act. There was 35 property owners were initially circulated, and that we will endeavor then to notify those 35 property owners and/or the additional speakers today to make sure that we cover everyone who has been participating in this process.
So Ida, we are not going to close the public meeting. Do we need a motion to say one way or the other, or can we just leave it hanging there?
With respect to the deferral, you can include that the public
Okay.
meeting will continue.
So we'll get that at that point. So I'm coming back to Councillor Partridge, who has made the motion to defer this to work with the area councillor and the applicant with staff. I recognize we have Councillor Ferguson in the room with us today. I assume you're here to speak on this issue, or do you want to wish to wait to hear what the committee says about deferring it? Okay, thank you. So I've got it, motion is on the table by Councillor Partridge, seconded by Councillor Pearson to defer this motion to a later date, and with the understanding that the ward councillor, the staff, and the applicant will work through some issues, and the public meeting will remain open. Have we got all that, folks? Okay, all those in favor? Carried. Any opposed? Thank you. So 6.4 is now deferred until a later date. Oh, sorry, I think another amendment was that we were to re-notify the 35 residents that were notified initially the first time. Just want to get that on, can we put that as an amendment? Anyone have any problems with that friendly amendment? All those in favor?
Carried.
Thank you. We're done.
Okay. All right, thank you, Councillor Johnson. I appreciate you taking over that, and job well done. And just let me find my... next on the agenda is 6.5, which is the application for amendment to the City of Hamilton zoning bylaw number 6593 for lands located at 1098 and 1100 Main Street West, and that is in Ward 1. Members of the public, in accordance with the provisions of the Planning Act, please be advised that if a person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to the Council of the City of Hamilton before Council approves the zoning bylaw amendments, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decision to the Council of the City of Hamilton, to the Ontario Municipal Board, and that the person or public body may not be added as a party to the hearing of an appeal before the Ontario Municipal Board unless, in the opinion of the board, there are reasonable grounds to do so. Now, are there any members of the public wishing to address item 6.5? Are there any members of the public wishing to address 6.5? One more time, and then you can come down. Are there any members of the public wishing to address item 6.5? All right. Folks, come on down. Councillor Pearson? Sorry. Do you want to see the, we would do the staff presentation normally first. Do you want
That's
us
what
to
I
go
thought.
ahead? All right, so we'll do that.
I'll sit quietly.
If you wouldn't mind, and you can take a seat just anywhere. There's some chairs right here if you want to have a seat. That way you don't have to go back up the stairs. My apologies for that. Thank you, Councillor Pearson. I appreciate it. Okay, I'd like to invite Daniel Barnett to please come forward for a staff presentation. Sorry about that confusion. Welcome, Daniel. Actually, Councillor Pearson, could I ask you just to take the chair for a moment while I step out, okay? Thank you.
Good day, Madam Chair and members of the Planning Committee. This is an application to change the zoning for 1098 and 1100 Main Street West for the establishment of 11 multiple dwelling units within an existing office building. The subject property is located on the northeast corner of Main Street West and Klein Avenue South. The subject property is designated mixed-use medium density in the Urban Hamilton official plan and again mixed-use medium density in the Ainslie-Wood-Westdale secondary plan. And as I said earlier, it's to implement a change in zoning from existing commercial zoning, which does not permit a multiple dwelling, to establish a zoning that would maintain the commercial zoning, but establishing a new zoning which would also add the use of a multiple dwelling within the existing office building. This is a concept plan that was originally submitted with the application when it was originally submitted. It shows the existing office building here at the corner. That's what's going to be converted to the 11 units. And this is the existing single detached dwelling that's at 1098 that will be retained. And it also shows that there will be not proposal for 9 parking spaces on site, 2 here, 5 here, and 2 more here. And then this is a hammerhead turnaround for the 2 at the side of the dwelling. This concept plan is what the staff report is based upon. This is what we've are recommending in our recommending approval for. But this is a second concept plan that was prepared by the applicant to try to increase the number of parking spaces to try to address that concern. Basically, it adds 1 additional parking space here at the front, maintaining the hammerhead, but maintaining another parking space here. Staff have a concern with this particular concept plan. Yes, it adds 1 more parking space, but this parking space is set up such that really the only way to get in and out of that, or get out of the parking space, is to back onto Main Street. So staff is, which is not appropriate, and staff doesn't support that particular change, which is why our recommendation is based on the first concept plan, which does not have that aspect of backing onto Main Street. This is an aerial photo of the subject lands. There are single detached dwellings to the north and to the west, commercial to the east and west along Main Street, and there's a place of worship across the street from the particular property, and then more residential zoning to the south of that place of worship. This is a photo of the existing office building from Main Street, taken from Main Street. This is a photo of the existing single detached dwelling at 1098 Main Street. This is a photo of the side of the single detached dwelling, where there would be the 2 tandem parking spaces there, which would primarily serve the single detached dwelling. This is a photo of the commercial property to the east of the subject property. This is a photo of the commercial building and the residential on the opposite side of Klein Street to the west of the property. This is a photo of the existing alleyway that is in behind the the multiple dwelling and the single detached dwelling. There will be in the future 2 parking spaces located behind the dwelling in a kind of a parallel parking setup, parallel to the alleyway. This is a photo of the rear of the subject property, of the single detached dwelling. This is where they would be adding 5 parking spaces at the rear, accessed off of the alleyway. In conclusion, staff is recommending that approval be given to the proposed application for rezoning to facilitate the conversion of the existing office building into 11 units multiple dwelling. As it is consistent with the provincial policy statements, conforms to the growth plan for places to grow, and conforms to the policies of the Urban Hamilton Official Plan and Ainsworth Westdale Secondary Plan, and is consistent with the general character of the area. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Daniel, appreciate that. For the new councillors around the table, if you wish to ask a question, please just tinkle your glass like that, and then that will get my attention, and I'll put you on the list. So, questions for staff. I have Councillor Johnson, Brenda Johnson, and Councillor Aidan Johnson. Councillor Brenda Johnson, go first, please.
I will defer to the area councillor if that's...
Very nice, thank you. Councillor Aidan Johnson.
Thanks. A clarification question. When I met with planning staff to discuss this, we talked about the need for good thick walls on the building to protect students inside from noise pollution. And my understanding is that that requirement is still built in. Could you confirm that, please?
There is a requirement for a holding provision.
Through the chair, please.
Sorry, through the chair. There's a requirement for a holding provision to require that the application be, or the proposed redevelopment go through site plan application. And through the site plan application, various noise attenuation measures would be required to be implemented, as well as the layout of the parking area could be reviewed through that site plan application.
Okay, councillor? Not a problem, I'll always remind you.
Thank you. Also, just just for the record, very quickly, there are actually 2 places of worship across the road from this proposed building. One is Grace Lutheran Church, which you were probably referring to, and then right next to Grace Lutheran, slightly around the corner, is Adas Israel Synagogue. So just
that is correct. It's yeah.
Okay, thank you, councillor. Councillor Brenda Johnson, please.
Thank you. And Daniel, just to clarify something here. You were speaking about the hammerhead, and that would allow for 1 parking spot, but staff are not of the opinion that should be okay, because it may potentially develop a problem. People will have to back onto Main Street. If there are no parking allowed there, does that now need a variance for the parking?
Well, they still need a modification for the parking, because overall the number of parking spaces they need for the 11 units and the single detached dwelling is a total of 16 spaces. They are providing on the first concept plan 9 spaces. On the second concept plan, they were showing 10 spaces. The difference basically is that they had, for the second concept plan, they had widened the area in front of the dwelling to provide both the hammerhead and the 10th parking space. Basically, here they have the parking space and then the hammerhead here. And then basically this parking space would, because it doesn't have a hammerhead, they can't use, this parking space can't really use this hammerhead to maneuver or to kind of turn around and exit in a forward manner. Any car parked here basically has really no other choice but to back out onto Main Street, which is not something we want to support. Whereas with this particular concept plan, this is not a parking space, it's the hammerhead, the turnaround for these 2 spaces, which when they back out, they can turn back into that area and then turn around in a forward manner and exit onto Main Street in a forward manner.
Okay, thank you for that. And through you, Chair, so if the hammerhead is now just a hammerhead and we're not using it for any parking spaces, you're back to 8, correct?
We're back to 9. The original was 9. They went to 10 with the revised plan, and but now we're back to 9, basically.
Okay, and I think everybody will know by the end of this 4 years that my interest in parking is extremely high, considering some of the developments that are happening in my area and the problems they can cause. So if I'm trying to figure this out, and I was doing this actually, and I was drawing lines. So theoretically, you're to come in off a Klein and park in the back?
For these 2 spaces, you're actually coming in off of Main Street and parking in these 2 spaces and then exiting by turning around in the hammerhead. For the 5 at the back of the dwelling and the 2 parallel, they would all be accessed off of the alleyway, either in a parallel parking situation or in terms of traditional 90-degree parking spaces, as in the case for the 5 at the back.
Okay, now here was my big question, because anybody who has teenagers and has cars in the driveway, you're constantly juggling cars to get the back car out. So the 2 cars that are on the east side,
These ones?
theoretically, we're hoping the one at the bottom is going to come out first. If not, that's going to create an issue for the one at the top, correct?
In terms of, through the chairs, in terms of this space here?
I'm parked in that space there, the one on the north, I'm going to say the north one. So now you've got the one at the south. I'm not moving anywhere, but the person in the north needs to get out. Explain to me.
That is, it's what we call a tandem space. Now, tandem parking is typically permitted for a single-family dwelling. The reason why it's a modification in this particular bylaw is because of the fact that they have now merged these 2 properties together. So in theory, all the parking is, in theory, shared basically across the multiple dwelling and the single-family dwelling. In this case, yes, so if someone parked here would have to have this car move out, be moved in order to get out, basically.
Okay, Councillor?
Okay, thank you. And through you to Daniel, the existing residential building, that's going to allow more than 1 tenant, correct?
Well, we can't control the type of people who live there, and so whether it's used for 1 person or 5 people, we cannot control that, basically.
So now I'm going to go down 5 years from now, and I'm going to pretend I'm the area councillor. I'm going to get a lot of phone calls, because if the residents inside that building do not get along, you're going to have bylaw in there almost weekly because he won't move his car.
Daniel?
Is that applicable?
I'm not sure if I can really answer that question.
Right, okay. So I guess my concern here is that we've set this up now to cause more staffing. If there's any problems inside the existing residential building, wherever that may be, if they've even rented out 1 room, and that car is trapped in the north spot and can't get out, the only way that if I'm that car and I need to get out, the only way I'm going to end up trying to solve this, if it's not done through my own mediation, is to call my counselor, to call bylaw. So I think that's the problem I'm having with the tandem. If that's going to be a rental building, then the tandem parking is an issue. If it's a existing residential building where just a family of 5 happy people are all related moving in, that's a different scenario. So I guess that's where my concern comes in. So thank you, and I'll ask questions to...
All right, no problem. And so next I have Councillor Doug Connolly, please. Questions for staff through the chair.
Thank you, through the chair. Is there enough parking places? You got 11 units being put there, and you got 9 parking places total, plus the house.
In terms of the total required parking, based on the bylaw, they need 16 spaces to meet the 16. 14 for the multiple dwelling, based on a ratio of 1 per unit plus 0.25 visitor parking per unit. So that would increases the number to 3. So they would need 14 for the multiple dwelling, and they would need 2 for the single family dwelling.
Through to the chair, we don't have that many.
No, they do not have that many spaces on the property. That's why they're asking for a modification to the bylaw to reduce the number of spaces from 16 down to 9 if you take the first concept plan, or 10 if you take the second concept plan.
I think we're going to cause a lot of problems with the spaces. Is there parking on the street?
There's no on-street parking on Main Street, no.
No parking.
Councillor?
No, I've had this problem in Stony Creek several times in the past, and it never works out. It never works out. So I have a hard time accepting 9 when there should be 16. I could see modifying it 1 or 2, but we're modifying about 40%. A lot. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Next I have Councillor Pearson, please. Questions for staff?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the previous speakers who raised the issue of parking. So I'm going to ask, with regards, can you just explain how were the cars at the back? Are they going to access the alleyway? Is that
That is correct.
Who owns the alleyway?
It's a public-owned alleyway.
Park there and blocks them in?
Then they're parked illegally, basically. If they're parked in the...
Building,
yeah.
that my dentist's office used to be in the building at the corner, so. The other question I have is with regards to the existing residential building, are we incorporating any green space in there? I mean, it is residential, not multi.
In terms of the existing building will remain, so they're not taking down the existing building, they're just basically converting the interior. There's room in the front for a small amount of landscaping, and there's also room in front of the single-family dwelling for some landscaping. But basically, in terms of the existing buildings, basically, the existing buildings are there today, basically, and that's not really proposed to be changed, basically.
Councillor?
But we're taking up the backyard of the existing building with parking spots, so there is no privacy area that we normally try to provide. I mean, we do in single-family residential homes.
In terms of green space in the back, no. There's basically the proposal is for the parking area fronting onto the alleyway.
My last question is, with regards to the existing structure and this new one, where are we looking at the amenities as far as waste storage for the waste bins, recycling, composting, et cetera?
The waste bin, I believe, is right back in this location here. Perhaps the applicant, when they come forward, can explain in a bit more detail about, about that particular.
Councillor?
Thank you very much.
All right, and Councillor Farr, please, is next.
My bet is Klein has some parking restrictions on street. Daniel, through you, Chair.
Daniel?
I believe so. I mean, there's definitely no parking on Main Street, but there would potentially be, because Klein is not a main street, there potentially could be some parking, on-street parking on Klein, but unfortunately I do not know what the exact restrictions are on Klein.
With through you, Chair, the proximity of the university, I suspect there'd either be permit or time limit parking, but I'll Google it. I was just trying to, but my computer's working. Have we confirmed this is student housing in the main building?
Daniel?
Well, yeah, in terms of the type of tenant, I don't control that. I know the applicant is trying to gear this towards students in terms of the kind of the setup of the units, but that is not something we can specifically control in terms of the type of person that can live here. So, I mean, while that may be the direction that the applicant wants to go, it's not something we can put into the bylaw saying that this is restricted to a specific tenant or type of tenant, basically.
Councillor?
Okay, and in my MAC years, we had SOCs. I bet they still have SOCs, but it was an organization that worked with off-campus residents. There's clearly much off-campus residents in this and areas all around it. So do we have any statistics from SOCs or MAC folks or anybody on staff as it relates to how many McMaster University students actually drive that live off campus through you, Chair?
Daniel?
Yeah, I do not have that information.
Councillor?
So do we know what was the square footage in the converted building to residential? Should we approve it through you, Chair? What's the square footage of those units?
Daniel?
If they're small, Chair, the reason why I ask that we can more greatly assume, and I'm seeing the ward councillor as well, when I ask the question, are they student residences, nod said yes. So the smaller they are, the more likely they'll be student residences, and with the proximity again to Matt, through you, Chair.
Yep.
I don't have exactly square footage of the units, but I do know that from reviewing earlier plans that the intention was the 11 units would be ranging between 3 to 5 bedroom units, basically. So there'd be multiple bedrooms, obviously, in each of these units. So that obviously lends itself to either a very large family or to multiple kind of students, basically.
Student living, which isn't rare as well in the area. So through you, Chair, to Daniel, what's preventing us as a committee looking at the appropriate time as some sort of condition upon lease arrangements with what will likely be students to have them sign off on the fact that parking is restricted or limited on the property through you, Chair?
Daniel?
Well, yeah, in terms of one of the things that was recommended is in the site plan agreement, basically, to include a kind of what we call a warning clause, basically, that any tenants or leasers basically be advised that there cannot be guaranteed a parking space for their unit, and that parking is limited both on the property and in the area, so that they are aware when they're coming in to rent one of the units these restrictions, basically. And so, they don't come in afterwards saying, well, I want a parking space, and the availability of on-street parking permits or parking on site is just not there. It's not there to meet their requirements, so they know ahead of time, basically.
Right. And that's a good
Excuse me,
point.
Councillor. Our legal counsel would like to add to the discussion. Mike, go ahead, please.
Through you, Madam Chair, generally we don't enter into site plan agreements. That's not the process at the city. And secondly, it's not a condition that can be imposed under Section 41 of the Planning Act underneath the site plan.
Thank you. Councillor?
Through you, Chair, to Mike, can we not just advise then?
Is it cannot be a warning clause that's inserted? Mike?
We don't get involved at the site plan stage with warning clauses generally untitled. Mr. Robichaud can speak.
So through you, Madam Chairman, to the councillor, we do provide those warning clauses to be registered on title, and one of the things that we've built into the report is that the parking space will be assigned to certain units. So going in when you rent the unit, you will know whether or not you have a parking spot, as opposed to first come, first served kind of arrangement.
Great.
And that for those units where there is no parking, it will be included in that warning clause. So for units 1 through 9, yes, you will have parking. For units 10 and 11, there will be no parking on site, and parking is not available either in terms of visitor or tenant parking. And that's one of the things that we will be doing and requiring that be included in all rental agreements, and that the owner will be required to meet that obligation.
And that's in the bylaw?
That'll be dealt with, sorry, Madam Chairman, it'll be dealt with at site plan, where we would enter into the necessary warning clauses.
At site plan.
We'll have warning clauses relating to noise. We'll also add additional warning clauses relating to parking and any other warning clauses that we feel are required as a condition of site plan approval. And the site plan won't be finalized until we're satisfied that those warning clauses be incorporated into the necessary agreements.
Councillor?
Great, and thank you both, Mike and Steve, for volunteering that. As I suspected, and I'll have a closer look at the surrounding area, but my bet is, Madam Chair, that there's probably no other options in the existing neighborhood, save for individual opportunities by possible renters to work out their own exclusive deals with area commercial spaces. Thank you, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. That is certainly a problem throughout our whole city. Councillor Green, please.
Actually, Councillor Farr more eloquently stated the line of reasoning and questioning that I had, given its proximity to the university, Madam Chair, and the need for student housing. Just through you to Daniel.
Daniel?
Daniel, just a question regarding its proximity to existing commercial spaces and what that might look like in terms of mixed use.
In terms of commercial, unfortunately, this map doesn't go zoom out far enough, but there is commercial activity on King Street to the north. There's a metro or grocery store further down King Street. There is commercial along Main Street itself, and then the university is about half a kilometer further to the west.
So,
Councillor?
Madam Chair, through you to Daniel, would it not make sense that given the density of student housing in existing residential areas that we would look towards, or at least consider mixed-use accommodations for students, given this desire for walkability and having kind of an integrated community?
So the question, Daniel, to you about multi-use?
Well, in terms of, first of all, there is direction on that, encouraging other forms of transportation in the official plan. There's even a policy that says, give me 1 second here. There's a policy, the E.4627, that says reduced parking requirements shall be considered to encourage a broader range of uses and take advantage of higher levels of transit. And Main Street, there is quite a bit of transit activity along Main Street. So based on that policy, that was part of the direction that staff took, basically, in terms of encouraging other forms of transportation. In this case, they do have transit availability. I believe the applicant is proposing some bike racks also on the property for alternative forms of transportation for residents of this particular property.
Councillor?
Thank you, Madam Chair. That seems consistent with what I expected out of the project.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your questions. I have Councillor Aidan Johnson for a second time, please.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. I'll pose this question of our current speaker, and I'll probably pose it again to our community representatives who are here to speak their concerns. And forgive me if this question is sort of framed in a negative way, but it's a question on my mind. Is it not the case that the surrounding community is is residential, but on Main Street itself, we have mostly businesses and non-residential. Is that, just to clarify, that is the situation, correct?
Clarification, Daniel?
Sure. I mean, there are some residential, obviously, in the example is that the existing property at 1098 is an existing single detached dwelling. Largely, it is commercial, but there is, some residential. As you can see down over here, there's some single detached residential. In terms of the kind of mixed-use development, I mean, the current zoning, the G zoning, kind of doesn't open up that possibility. It basically permits commercial and then some limited single and duplex type uses, basically. That's hence why they're coming in for a rezoning applications, because the current zoning doesn't reflect that mixed use medium density designation, which kind of permits or encourages both types of activities.
Councillor?
Thank you. I'll continue my questioning with our community reps, who are probably better positioned to provide the information I'm looking for. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Councillor. I have no other speakers for questions for staff. So a motion to receive the staff presentation. Councillor Aidan Johnson, Councillor Pasuta, all in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Now, does the applicant or representative wish to speak at this time? I think I'd like to hear your presentation. If you're going to say something, come on down to the podium, and we'll hear your comments now, and then I'll move on to the public, please. So welcome. State your name and the usual.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of committee and members of new committee. I look forward to working with you over this next term. My name is James Webb. I'm a local planning consultant speaking to you today on behalf of the proponents. I do have a very brief presentation, but just listening to the questions from the councillors, I think there's a bunch of immediate information that I think will benefit and help you in your consideration of the matter.
Absolutely.
The project is referred to as Main Max Student Housing. This is purpose-built housing specific to the university. And there is already, further to Councillor Farr's line of questioning, there is already an ongoing open dialogue with the McMaster University Housing Division. They are very supportive of this project. They have it on their radar, and they look forward to the opportunity to be able to offer this housing to their students. As it relates to all matters of management of this property, whether it be parking, snow shoveling, maintenance of the laneway. As I said, it's purpose-built student housing. There is a backer behind the project who will have on an open retainer property managers to deal with all of those issues, including any complaints with respect to parking. There may, subject to, as the business model unfolds, there may even be someone within that very building who has the authority to deal with those types of conflicts. All people within the building are given the contact details for the property manager in the event of any situations arising. So first preference is to deal with it internally through the managers that's retained for that purpose. Ideally, there won't be any conflicts to the extent that the city needs to even get involved. Every project has an issue. The matter before you today is an adaptive reuse of two existing buildings. It does, for all intents, retain those existing buildings. There's a lot of people that, in fact, have a fondness of the building of 1100 Main Street, and they're quite happy to see it retained in its current form and function. There will only be minor upgrades and renovations to the building, including the replacement of the windows to ensure that that noise issue is fully and completely implemented. I don't believe that there's any issue with respect to the proposed use, which is to allow for the purpose-built student housing. The matter before you, the tough issue is parking. There's a matter before you today, and we are seeking relief from what would otherwise be the city's parking requirements as it relates to the use. And I think that there's two key themes that support this reduction. One is the actual form of the use, and secondly is the location of the use. As I said, the form of the use is for student housing. All of the comments that I've already heard for committee have been anticipated by the proponents, and all of those same items, even acknowledged by staff, are accepted and agreed to. There will be leases entered into with all of the tenants of the building, advising them that this building only has a total of 9 parking spaces, and those spaces will, for all intents, be rented to individual people. So there will be some that will have a parking space and others that do not. They will be made aware of that through their leases. And we agree with staff that it's appropriate to also include that as a warning clause on the site plan document. The location is appropriate. We've considered many applications at this committee where we have sought relief for parking. Each and every file is considered on its own merits. And my submission to you is that this is one of those locations, whether it be from a broader policy context or just by virtue of its location, this is an appropriate location to consider reductions in parking. It's located on a very busy main street that is the intended location to accommodate rapid transit. It has immediate proximity to GO bus service. It has immediate proximity to walking paths and bike lanes. It embraces what we are now referring to as active transportation alternatives, cycling, walking, and public transit. Again, as I said, the building is to be marketed specifically to the university. The university is approximately 500 meters away, so again, there's no need for these people to have cars to go back and forth to the university. As it relates to any visitor parking issues, again, there is very limited options available. There is no parking on Main Street. There is the opportunity on some of the adjoining streets internal to the neighborhood for some very limited parking. I believe the majority is signposted either as permit parking or limited time period parking. So we don't anticipate these residents bringing cars and being able to leave them in the neighborhood because the existing protections in the neighborhood for those residents would discourage that. I think, Madam Chair, I'll end my comments at that point.
All right.
We are in agreement with staff. This will go through a site plan process to deal with all those issues we've talked about. We're also going to be providing a landscape plan such that when the work is completed on the site, that the landscaping is fully and completely restored to level and quality that the city would otherwise expect. And at that point, Madam Chair, I'd be pleased to answer any questions from committee.
All right, thank you, James. And I do have 2 questioners. Councillor Brenda Johnson is first and Councillor Jason Farr is second. Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, and through you to James. James, I don't know if you can put it back to it's appendix. Can you just play around with it until we find the plan? There, that's good. We have 2 tandem parking. I think you've heard earlier about that situation and how I'm feeling right now. Appendix C actually showed that the Hammerhead had 3 parking spots, and that left 1, 2, 3 on the east side completely open. So it allowed actually 2 accesses into this property, one being off the laneway and the other one being off Main Street. Why was Appendix C, why was the 3 in the front? Do you know why that wasn't chosen?
So this is Appendix C. This is staff's preferred design.
That's their
So it has-
preferred
there's
design.
2 spaces on the right-hand side that will be tandem parking, and then 1 hammerhead that's not to be used for parking. Our original submission, in fact, had the 2 tandem spaces plus an additional parking, and in discussions with staff, it was agreed that that may not be workable. The intent is to keep that hammerhead free and open so that no vehicles have to back onto Main Street.
Okay.
We're in agreement that that situation is appropriate. And there are barriers in place such that you can't now drive all the way through from Main Street through to the rear of the property. There'll be wheel bumpers put in place, shown on the site plan, implemented by the site process to ensure that that is, for all intents, protected for those 2 spaces.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you. But my question was that in Appendix C, actually there are 3 parking spots in front of the existing residential building. Appendix C showed that there would be 3, and take the 2 tandems out and take the one at the extreme north out that's in the back parking lot. So therefore now you have 2 entrances into this spot, and that they wouldn't need to back out of Main Street, because if they pulled in to the Hammerhead, then they would back out into now the laneway, and then they can pull out front into Main Street, correct?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think there's some confusion with respect to which site plan is the preferred site plan. This is.
Oh, I know what the preferred site plan is.
We had started with D. I think this may be the one that you're referencing.
No.
Through the chair, please, everybody.
Excuse me, but it's Appendix C, and it's page 1 of 1 in the staff report, and it shows 3 in the front, and it eliminates all the eastern parking, 1, 2, and 3.
Not sure if, through your Madam Chair.
Perhaps that's a question for staff to clarify.
We have the hammerhead to the front,
Yep.
in front of the dwelling, and the 2 spaces in tandem arrangement to the right-hand side.
Okay,
And to
so
the rear, you have then the 5 spaces that are accessed from the laneway, and there's no movement from the rear to the front.
Excuse me,
Right.
Councillor. Jason would like to add to the conversation.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, and staff's apologies. There was the Appendix C included in the reports includes some markups that were looked at as an alternative configuration that weren't part of the recommended design. So it's kind of hard to see the actual recommended design underneath the pen drawing. So what's on the screen there is what is the recommended configuration.
I totally understand the recommendation. I'm just wondering why C was actually flat out no, because to me it made more sense to have an entranceway coming in off the alleyway and one coming in off Main Street. But anyways, I'll ask those questions later. So thanks, James. That was my question.
All right, thank you. And I must apologize. I did have Councillor Brenda Johnson as first, when in actual fact, Councillor Farr did ask to be first. And so my apologies. Go ahead, sir.
It's okay. I'm trying to time 2 committee meetings at once. Some of us have already left for City Housing Hamilton, where there's an important meeting across the hall, and I'll have to get over there soon too. But I would like to vote on this before we are through you to James. Good to see you. Looking forward to working with you again this next term of council as an outside planner who often appears before this committee. I'm glad to hear as well that you came up at this point and noted that this is purpose-built student housing. Good for me to know. Our staff didn't get it, but do you have any evidence of statistics revolving around McMaster University students? How many of them drive, and ultimately how many of them are going to have an issue with parking?
James?
Through you, Madam Chair. No, I do not have any specific statistics that I can provide you. I'm not sure if you were in the room when I made the comment. There has already been dialogue with the university, the Student Housing Division. When this goes up on the roster of available sites, it will be clearly indicated that there is not parking for all units. There's a limited supply. I
believe through you, Chair, I think there's a development just to the west, a converted school that turned into student residences. I don't remember the previous councillor for Ward 1 ever having issue, at least at this committee level or otherwise, with the parking there, and I think it was even less than this and way more units. Are you aware the converted school conversion that I'm talking about would have been about 5 years ago? Through you, Chair.
James?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm not sure if I'm familiar with that specific.
No problem. Through you, Chair. My recollection is, having visited that site, there was lots of amenities for multimodal or bike parking indoors and different things that I noted, and it was a lot further walk than the 500 meters you alluded to. So through you, you mentioned the 2 themes. The form of use is clear. That gives me some confidence. And the only other question, 3 of 23 in the report, if it came down to it and this committee absolutely was insistent, all things considered, I don't know why we would, but if this committee was insistent on upping the game in terms of the number of parking spots, would you have contemplated this point from 1964? The building permit for the office was subject to the removal of that dwelling that remains at 1098?
James?
Is that something you would do to satisfy the why we would need them, but the parking requirements?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think my answer is I'm not really authorized to give you an answer otherwise. I don't think that it's appropriate or necessary to remove that dwelling. It is now in use. Building permit, there was photographs showing construction. I just want to be absolutely clear. That building had gone through the full and complete building permit review process. Permits were issued to permit that work. So that building's now occupied, and it's being used for student housing as the precursor to what's to become the larger project. So yes, there was an agreement 50 years ago, and I don't believe that there's a need or necessity at this point in time to contemplate its removal. And in fact, I'm not sure that that's the visual landscape that you necessarily want for this piece of Main Street, which is parking up against the street.
Councillor?
Yeah, through you, Chair, a lot of things I would agree have changed in the last 50 years. I was just sort of throwing it out there as as an option if need be, and maybe you can bring that back to the owners of the property or the people behind this project, which puts student housing on a main thoroughfares rather than in the heart of a residential area, which, by the way, after a quick Google, Klein has no parking or no stopping. Arkell has a 2-hour limit. And there's plenty in the two places of worship across the road, and maybe these students can get creative if they do drive. But on that note of plenty changing over 50 years, the big three automakers would agree that they just don't have near the market they had, and in terms of young people buying cars as they did 50 years ago, or even 30 years ago, or 20 years ago. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Conley, please.
Through the chair. My questions won't be anything to do with parking, so it'll be a nice change. You mentioned property manager. Is that somebody that's on site?
There will be, through you, Madam Chair, there will be someone on site that is, for all intents, empowered by the owners of the property to look after their issues, but there will also be a firm, in similar parallels to a condominium. There will be a firm that is retained, that is available, based in Hamilton, a local phone number, not someone in Cambridge or Kitchener. There is someone available that is local to the site to address any issues.
That's 24 hours a day. There'll be somebody available.
Through you, Madam Chair, yes, yes. The contract has not yet been executed, but I think hearing your comments, that's something that will go in the terms of reference that the proponent will be issuing.
Just to make it clear, there's a maximum, through the chair, a maximum of 55 students could live there, right? You said 5 per unit, and there's 11 units, is that right?
Through you, Madam Chair, in the existing dwelling at 1098, that's been approved through a building permit and has 5 bedrooms. The balance of the building is still to go through its detailed building permit review process. It contains 11 independent small dwelling units, not in any way oriented to families, nor would they be welcoming in terms of their setup and design. There will be, at this point, the number that we're looking at is 41 bedrooms within that building proper.
Councillor?
And thank you, Madam Chair. And the leases that are they individual leases, or are they per apartment? Like I'd lease an apartment and then I could fill it, or each one is an individual lease?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm looking at the proponent, and my understanding is they are individual leases. So you don't take the unit and then get to decide who moves in with you. They are all independently signed, executed, guaranteed, I would assume, by distraught fathers and others.
I guess my last comment is, this used to be used as a commercial development. What did they do for parking then?
And through you, Madam Chair, I was going to offer that comment previously. This building has for a long period of time been used for commercial purposes, and it's to a state now where I'm going to suggest that its viability has not been great, and in part because there really is no parking for that former use. They have been parking behind the existing dwelling. That's an existing condition behind 1098. So for all intents and purposes, that's part of the reason why that commercial use is not as successful as might think given its location on Main Street. It's a site that doesn't have a preponderance of parking to support commercial uses. Our submission is that the change in use to residential purpose-built student housing is appropriate because they don't need that same volume of parking.
Okay,
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, good questions, Councillor Conley, thank you. And Councillor Aidan Johnson, please, go ahead.
Thank you, and via you, Madam Chair. Throughout the summer and throughout the fall, I knocked on every single door on King Street and Main Street and met a mixture of student and non-student residents in the neighborhood. And a recurring theme I got from student residents along King Street and along the relevant part of Main Street that we're discussing was about terribly thin walls that they weren't aware of upon moving in, that let in a huge and significant amount of noise pollution that interferes with their studying. Could you please describe in whatever detail you have the measures that are going to be taken around student protection on that point?
Good question,
Madam Chair.
James.
As a starting point in the submission of our application, when we went through the formal consultation process, staff identified immediately that because of its location adjoining Main Street, noise would be an issue. Excuse me. So we were required to retain a professional noise consultant to undertake an assessment of the road traffic, as it were, and what that existing building represented by way of sound attenuation. The building does, in fact, this is an instance where the building does, in fact, have very thick walls. There's no issues with the walls in terms of their ability to respond to sound. The issue, in fact, is the windows. The windows are quite old, and it's the recommendation of that acoustic study that all of the windows facing the street, they are not necessarily all the windows in the building, but the noise study has modeled all faces of the building as they're impacted by that road noise and provided very specific recommendations to the extent that, and I believe it's articulated well in the staff report, they've identified the noise rating that all of those new replacement windows need to achieve as the accepted level of mitigation necessary so that there is no adverse effect to the residents.
So it's safe to say that our proponent has a firm commitment to implementing all of those measures recommended?
Well, through you, Madam Chair, it's a firm commitment that's then backed up by the site plan approval process because the drawing that we've prepared to date has a number of undertakings that the owner will be signing wherein he's in agreement to implement those very measures. And the site plan approval process gives the city the mechanism to ensure that that work is done. And as a final layer, when the building permit submission comes in to the third floor of the Building Services Division, there is a requirement that an acoustical engineer certify that those building permit plans have incorporated the necessary mitigation. Sorry, that's a very long-winded way of saying been fully and completely evaluated, and there are measures in place to ensure that it's done properly.
Thank you. And Madam Chair, I'll reserve further questions for our community representatives.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, James. And now may I have a motion to receive his presentation? Councillor Brenda Johnson, Councillor Aidan Johnson, all in favor. And that is carried. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Now we'll like to hear from the public. Please come on down. My apologies for keeping you waiting. And state your name, and if I can have you sign in the book when you're done speaking. You did already? Bless you. Wonderful.
And my name is Donna Crockett. I own the property at 1070 Main Street West, which is several buildings east of this proposed plan. Age has some advantages because I've been around so long. I built the building that I presently own, and at the same time as a Dr. Schechter built this building that's under discussion. There is only 2 blocks of commercial area on Main Street in that close section. My building, I have 12 tenants. My building is fully rented. The problem that this building had was when it was originally built, besides, as Mr. Farr, I think, mentioned, the house was to be demolished for extra parking on site. Besides that, they owned the property across the street from on Main Street for parking, because with, it was mostly doctors at that time. For the tenants, it was a fair amount of parking, and then if you have clients, which you're not going to be in business long if you don't, they needed parking for those. So that was, it was not just the little bit of space that you see here. And then I don't know what happened to the lot across the street, because that's when the building was not viable as a commercial project. I don't know if it's still part of this. Nobody seems to know. And when I asked for something, I was told that I had to apply for the right of information.
Freedom of information? Yeah.
Freedom of information.
Yeah.
I found that out yesterday, so that's a problem. My greatest concern is because I own the building nearby, and I thought these were going to be 11 3-bedroom apartments. Now we're up to 55, so that's kind of a lot of people, plus 5 in the existing house. So we're looking at like 60 people living in that little area with 9 parking spaces. Nobody's going to have company. Nobody's going to be moving in or out. Deliveries. I mean, it would just be a madhouse. You mentioned about this double parking or whatever you call it. Tandem parking. You'll see these little squares at the back. Well, just behind that, and perhaps that's impeding the fact that you can't go right through. There are 7 newly built lockers at the back of the house, so that takes up some extra parking spaces, and another addition on the back of the house as it was originally built. I'm very concerned because you can put all of these warning clauses you want. It's not going to meet BUAL, and what will happen, because I know from past experience in another location, they'll steal it from wherever they can. When the building was originally built, there was parking on Main Street, and of course Klein. Now it's gone. I think at the even around the corner, I think it's a 2-hour limit. Well, that's not going to help for anybody that's living in this building. There's no guarantee it's going to be student housing. So somebody might move in to this 5-bedroom apartment and have 3 cars. I just find it ludicrous that there's no parking solution the way it is. The gentleman mentioned about taking a house down, that would help. When I built my building, I had to buy an adjacent house to provide sufficient parking. I have 33 spaces. My building is about the same size as this building. They keep referring to that house as single family, but the gentleman said already there are how many? 5 in it? Oh, the side yards. I mean, there are all kinds of discrepancies as to what is and isn't allowed. I don't know what the fire regulations are as far as those are concerned, but I'm sure somebody will look into it. I'm just really upset. Parking is at a premium in that area. And they're just going to steal it, not only from me, the dance studio that the gentleman showed beside it. They've even put up barricades just so that they won't encroach on their property. Obviously. I like to see development. I'm in favor of student housing and all that sort of thing. But I don't want to give up my parking spaces because it will impact my tenants. And if I don't have parking spaces for my tenants, I won't have tenants.
All right, thank you, Donna. I appreciate your presentation, appreciate you coming down. Just hang on. Wait a moment. Your counselor, Counselor Aidan Johnson, has some questions for you.
Thank you. I've heard great things about your building, and thank you for being a good landlord or landlady.
Thank you.
Your tenants like living there, I know for a fact.
I've been there so long.
And pardon me, Madam Chair, I'm going through you. And a lot of our student landlords who are absentee landlords have a lot to learn from you. So thank you very much for your concern. And Madam Chair, I don't want to minimize any of the concerns that have been brought by our speaker. The question I have for her is a challenge question, which is the following. As I'm sure you are aware, we have a crisis in Westdale and Ainsleewood of students and non-students conflicting, in large part because we have students living in and mixed in with non-student families and living their lives in all of their noisy joy in that context. And a school of thought has risen up in Ainsleewood and Westdale to the effect that the only place that any of us in the community are happy to see student housing created and new student apartments designated is on Main Street West. For all of the terrible imperfections that our speaker has pointed to, the argument, the primary community argument for I want to hear your response to the argument. The primary community argument for this development is we need to relieve to some degree the pressure upon the inner residential part of Westdale and Ainsleewood, far from the madding crowd of Main Street, and that this is a rare, precious opportunity to put some students on Main Street. So how do you respond to that argument?
Donna?
There are a variety of, for instance, I understand the McMaster is looking at expanding its student housing, which is obviously, with the amount of space they have, the most logical thing. Across the street, the Columbia School built a building of student housing for their mostly Oriental students with considerable parking. And I think McMaster has to do that. You just can't keep encroaching on commercial space. My little commercial area provides a lot of services. Somebody said they go to the barber shop that's been there for 30 some odd years. There's an accountant, there's a dressmaker, there's a bailiff, people that contribute to the growth and enjoyment of that area. If they just keep there won't be any local shopping areas.
Councillor?
You know, 16 to 9 was what we were talking about at one point. Needed 16 parking spaces and providing 9. Now we're up to, what, 46? I mean, a few, as somebody mentioned, a variance, a few parking spaces, but that's ludicrous. Those people are going to have parking needs, and if they don't get it there, they can't get it on the street, they're going to steal it from the neighbors, of which I am one. It was even a problem, I think, when they were doing some construction, and that's why the dance studio next door put up the barricades.
Councillor?
That's all I have, really. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Donna. I appreciate it. I have no more questions for you.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Motion to receive, Councillor Brenda Johnson, Councillor Doug Conley. All in favor, please. Carried. And next, please, if you could state your name and sign the book after you've made your comments. I appreciate that, or before.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got to the age where I have to do it before, or it won't get done.
I can appreciate that. Introduce yourself, please, sir.
My name is David Hitchcock.
David, thank you.
I live at 18 Klein Avenue South, which is just around the corner from this property in a northerly direction, almost at King. I live just outside the notification area of 120 meters, so I found out about this application only by accident about a month ago. I wish that I had been involved in the discussions that have gone on with the Community Association Board and I think perhaps the previous Ward 1 councillor in developing and the planning department, obviously, in developing the details of this proposal, because I would have liked to see serious consideration given to carrying out what was supposed to happen in 1964, which was to demolish the house at 1098 in order to provide adequate parking. In the meantime, the developer has gone ahead, anticipating approval, and made substantial changes to this property at 1098 Main Street West. So I think I'm going to have to live with the fact that that's not any longer an option that is seriously to be considered. I support this application because I think that it will provide appropriate student accommodation for students at McMaster along a main street with public transit, which is a desirable goal. But I have a number of concerns, some of which have been addressed already in the discussion, and I'd just like to raise them and see what responses the applicant or the applicant's representative would have. I will reinforce what Councillor Farr reported to you, that there is no parking on Klein between King and Main. It is considered an arterial road. This one block, we get our snow plowed early. It's a fast way for cars to get from King to Main. So there's no parking there. And the last I checked, around the corner on Arkell, which is a little bit to the north of what you see on the screen, it was 3-hour parking. On my block between King and Main, there are 19 homes owned by absentee landlords and rented out to students. So I went up and down the street 3 times, writing down the license plates of the cars in the driveways, and discovered there were 30 cars in the driveways of these 19 homes. Now, you now have to estimate how many students are living in each of these homes. The Ainslie Wood Westdale Community Association has monitored advertisements for the off-campus student housing and determined that on average there's 6.5 students in these homes. I think it's probably a little less on my street. Certain ones I know have far less than that, so I'm guessing 5, roughly. So about 95 students have 30 cars, which is more or less 1 car for every 3 students, round numbers. So at the Committee of Adjustment hearing, the proponent for the applicant said that they were anticipating 41 students in the office building that's to be converted and 7 in the separate house, making 48 students altogether. It might be a little more, it might be a little less, but 3 to 1, that is 16 cars. You would expect, you know, for people living that close to the university. They don't drive the cars back and forth to the university. They drive the cars when they go home to their parents in Mississauga or St. Catharines or London or North Bay or wherever it is they come from. So they have a need for cars. They have to go and get groceries, etc. By the way, as to my knowledge, there has never been a problem at some of these houses where there are 3 or even 4 cars with tandem parking, with one student having asked another to back out or, you know, so that they can get out. I don't think that's a real problem as far as the tandem parking is concerned, but I think it is a real problem, potentially, that it's not proportional in terms of the cars that students bring in that area, never mind the regulations. So my question to the applicant is, what reason do you have to think that 9 parking spaces are going to be enough for these 48 students? And if they're not enough, what do you think the other ones who want parking are going to do? What ideas do you have about that? Are they going to steal it from the thriving commercial property to the east at number 1070? A second concern is about the management of this purpose-built student residence, as we've now been told that it is. I looked up on the web this proponent, Collingwood Cambridge Holdings Incorporated, and can find out nothing about it. The collaborative construction looks to be a reputable general contractor and project manager for building the thing. As to the owner of the property, I could find out nothing, and I would be reassured if the representative for the applicant could say something about any track record that this owner has in running student residences, whether they actually can be, we can have an assurance that they're going to run a quality operation. We have heard that they intend to have a property management company hired to take care of property management issues and to have somebody in the complex designated as an on-site person. A third concern I have has to do with the noise for the students living inside the office building, the converted office building. I have read the whole planning staff report and see that there's a holding designation proposed, which will be removed only when the conditions on this noise are in the site plan. Well, that's very fine, but okay, so they're in the site plan, the holding zone is removed. What is the mechanism for ensuring that these things that are in the site plan are actually in the building when the building is constructed? And I have in mind particularly the fact that the building permit for this property originally in 1964, when the office building was built, made it a condition to tear down the house beside to provide the parking, which was never done, 50 years. Are we going to wait 50 years for the sound insulation to be properly done in this building? What is the, and this is a question to the staff, I think, is how does the city staff make sure that this aspect of the site plan is actually carried out? And the fourth and last concern has to do with this other condition of approving the site plan. I quote, "The city will require the owner to include a warning clause in all rental agreements advising prospective," it should be prospective, tenants of limits to on-site parking and parking restrictions in the surrounding neighborhood. In addition, staff will require that parking be assigned or included in the leases for 9 of the units, and that the leases for the other units will identify that no on-site parking is being provided or available, unquote. Actually, we've heard that they're not leases per unit, but leases per individual. So there are going to be 9 individuals, I guess, who will have a parking place, and 39 or so who won't. So my question about this condition in the site plan approval, how is the city going to ensure that this warning is actually included in the rental agreements if and when students begin to occupy those 2 buildings? It's going to be long after the site plan approval, and I guess that's a question to the staff as well.
All right, David, and what your counselor can certainly ask those questions of staff, and once you're finished with your presentation.
I'm done.
You're done. Okay. Any questions for the presenter, please? Aidan, Councillor Johnston.
A question of procedure for you, Madam Chair. I would like to ask the questions we've heard of staff. Would it be appropriate for me to refer them simply by wave of the hand to our staff for answers?
So once we close off with this presenter, then absolutely you can ask your questions to staff.
In that case, I do have a question, and it's the same question I asked to our last community representative. And David, you and I have talked about this already, that we do need, you agree, I think, that we do need student housing on Main Street West.
Absolutely, and I in fact support this application. I worry about the things I expressed worries about, and I would like to have as much assurance as I can get about those worries.
That's it for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. And Maria, Councillor Pearson, please, for David.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the presenter, thank you, sir, for all the points you raised. You mentioned, and it's been mentioned a few times, that the house that they're proposing now to maintain was supposed to come down back in '64 when this was built. Someone else mentioned that the Dr. Schechter, who had this building built, actually owned property elsewhere in the neighborhood that was used for parking. Are you aware of that?
I believe I know which parking was being referred to by the previous presenter. It's a lot just across the street. So it's on the south side of Main and the west side of, it would be, I guess, Klein Avenue South, continuing across Main Street, across from the Lutheran Church. I have no idea who owns that property now. There is a car share car occupying one space in it. And I'm not sure that what arrangements there are for charging people who want to use that space, and I don't know how many spaces there are there. So that's Madam Chair, my understanding is what's behind the question, maybe that's a place where there's some parking. Yeah.
Okay.
It would be nice if it were so.
Yes, and thank you very much for your presentation and for coming down. Motion to receive, Councillor Aidan Johnson and Councillor Connolly. All in favor? Carried. Now, I need to ask this 3 times. Does anyone else wish to address the committee on this item? Does anyone else wish to address the committee on this item? Does anyone else wish to address the committee on this item? Seeing none, motion to close the public meeting. Councillor Pasuta, Councillor Aidan Johnson, all in favor? That is carried. Okay. Now, coming back to you, Councillor Johnson, do you have questions for staff?
David can correct me by walking up to me, but the primary question I took from our last presentation was about this agreement from 1964-65 about use of the adjoining house. I'm just wondering what staff have to say.
Would that be Steve or Daniel? Ed? Thank you. Our chief builder would be Ed.
I understand you're asking a question about the previous building that was there and not demolished. That's before the regulatory requirements of the Building Code Act. The Building Code Act came into place in 1975. So that would have been prior to any involvement we had in the city. So I'm not sure what the agreement was at the time. We could do a little bit of homework on that, but we haven't got an answer for you today.
Could perhaps bring it forward to council if you wish, Councillor Johnson. Microphone, please.
Oh, pardon me.
And ask it again.
Oh, excuse me. And maybe this is a question for our legal department also. I just want to satisfy myself that there is no lingering legal implication to this bit.
Mike?
Is the question in regards to the agreement that had to do with the house? Through you, Madam Chair, I'm not aware of the agreement. I'm in the same position as the chief building official. I'd have to see what this agreement is, whether it's still in force and whether it can be enforced. We haven't seen it. Haven't been consulted on it.
All right, and I think if, just to clarify, what we're talking about here is that the requirement was for the house to be torn down to allow for parking, and that was part of the last building permit that was executed, and it was written right into that. And I think the question is, whatever happened to that? Councillor?
Yes, correct. That is the question, and basically I just want to make sure there isn't some hidden legal trap in all of this. By mistake, by oversight. I don't know the answer, that's why I'm asking the question.
Okay. And so in an effort to move this along, do I have any suggestions from either legal or building on how to deal with this particular question before we move forward?
Through you, Madam Chairman, if the intent of the 1964 requirement was that that building be demolished to provide the required parking to meet the zoning bylaw requirements. So by not demolishing the house, then they would not have provided the required parking, and that would be and therefore that property would have been in non-compliance with the zoning bylaw. However, by changing the zoning bylaw regulations, any non-compliance with respect to the zoning bylaw would be removed or eliminated. And I think also, and there was two other provisions. There was the changes to the Ontario Building Code, which gave, the Building Commission now has much more authority to enforce those regulations. And secondly, at the time in 1964, when this property was developed, we didn't have the site plan control authorities that we currently have to ensure that properties develop in the fashion that they develop. So the property would be brought into conformity with zoning bylaw regulations by changing the zoning to recognize the current situation as opposed to them having some sort of legal non-conforming status. And then secondly, through the site plan process, we can then ensure the implementation of this concept plan. And then thirdly, through the new building code permissions and authorities, some of the additional measures get further implemented, i.e. that we ensure that they do the noise attenuation measures that are required of them, and that any other warning clauses that we want, we will then also have that registered on title as a formal site plan agreement that not only binds the current owner, but any subsequent owners on a go-forward basis. I hope I answered your legal questions.
I think there were a few.
I would like to thank my colleague on city staff for proving that non-lawyers can give absolutely fabulous legal arguments. Based on what I've heard, my own legal conscience has actually been satisfied, and I thank you. What sort of retains and remains from my question is a non-legal point, and it's sort of the point many people have been beating around and referring to, which is something that I think needs to be acknowledged, that certainly I acknowledge, that there is a problem with parking to do with this situation. And I think that our proponent will be needing to work with the community going forward on parking solutions. I think that the agreement from 64-65, legally obliterated as it is, and I'm convinced that it has, I'm presently convinced based on what I've just heard that there's strong statutory grounds for legal elimination of that concern. The ethical point remains, right? The kind of community get-along point remains. So, I mean, I remain in favor of this development, but I'm looking forward to working with our proponent going forward on constructive solutions for parking. And I wish we had good numbers on number of students who drive. I've been trying to get all kinds of stats from McMaster recently to do with just number of students living in the community, never mind number of students living in the community who also drive. So these are challenges we face going forward. It's a very complex situation, and none of what I've said changes my basic willingness and readiness to vote for this project.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Now, before we go to moving the motion for the staff report, and I will come back to you for that, may I have a motion to close the public meeting? I don't think I did that. Councillor Pearson, Councillor Johnson, Brenda Johnson, all in favor? That is carried. And now may I have a motion on the staff report? Councillor Aidan Johnson, back to you.
And pardon me, Madam Chair, I'll ask for your guidance in sort of crafting this. It's a motion to accept the report. What's the correct language?
Yep, so it would be a motion to move the staff report for approval?
Yes.
Or for denial, or for deference?
I move for acceptance of the report.
All right, thank you. And that's seconded by?
I'll second that.
Councillor Farr. All in favor, please? Carried. Anyone opposed? Thank you, everybody. Well done. Excellent. So we've already dealt with 6.6. Now we're moving on to item 6.7, which are housekeeping amendments to the Hamilton Noise Control Bylaw. And it is a public meeting, so I do need to ask the question. Are there any members of the public wishing to address committee respecting to item 6.7, the housekeeping amendment to the Hamilton Noise Control Bylaw, number 11285? Are there any members of the public wishing to address the committee on this item? Are there any members of the public wishing to address the committee on this item? Seeing no one, may I have a motion to close the public meeting? Councillor Connolly, Councillor Pearson, all in favor? Carried. And I'll come to you, Councillor Farr, for a motion on the report, please.
You know what, I probably...
Well, who is the word councillor? Oh, Ward 3, okay. Well, do you want to defer then to the ward councillor to move it? I think that would be appropriate.
I so move.
All right, Councillor Green moves the motion to approve the report, and seconded by Councillor Collins? Councillor Farr? All right, so moved by Councillor Green, seconded by Councillor Farr. All in favor, please? Carried. Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. Now, moving on to, are there any presentations? I don't see any. So moving on to discussion items. Yes, Councillor Farr.
On 8.1 through you, some questions for staff. This is revolving around the mediation service pilot program. 24 months look up, and I believe it would be Marty. And Kelly's here too, I see. I can be very brief. It's a good report. It was born of a time where we were receiving a lot, and I think continue to receive a lot of issues as it relates to primarily neighborhood disputes. And I have found this mediation service program to be most effective in an area where we can't even define in this particular report. Neighborhood disputes exist still, and probably in the same numbers they did in 2008 when this was originally contemplated and eventually led to this 24-hour pilot. But having the ability as a ward councillor, personally, to tell Mr. Smith and Mr. Jones, who live beside each other and who constantly call A, the councillor, B, bylaw staff, C, maybe police, who both know inside and out bylaws better than anybody or all of us combined, and create a great log of time for both staff and sometimes the councillor. Just the mere mention that we have a dispute here, that we have a service that you may require called mediation services, throws all that out the door. They don't want to sit together in a kitchen with some middle facilitator, but they do stop calling over and over again with complaints, whether they are related to a bylaw or questions or whatever. it just suddenly stops. And I can't measure how many times that just having a mediation service has proven effective. And just from my ward councillor point of view, but through you to Marty, what we can clearly see here in this report is we're referring to not those immeasurables, but just 2 referrals really since February 2014, right? Through the chair?
Marty?
Through Madam Chair, yes, that's correct.
And so would it be prudent of us, given that the cost is greatly less than what we're paying now, which is roughly $11,000 in total and $5,700 roughly annually, to have CGI be our representatives for mediation? Would it be, through you, Chair, given what my preamble, which the Chair was nice enough to let me continue it, would it be cost effective to maintain viability, at least, to say we still have a mediation services and then do so through this alternative that's provided in this report through you?
Marty?
So through Madam Chair, one of the reasons that we had recommended the mediation service was to try and reduce some of the workload in our bylaw enforcement area. A lot of our work is through neighbors that just don't get along, and so we thought this might be a good alternative. It has not reduced the workload, but we knew though that many members of council do have this as an alternative to throw out to their constituents who don't get along. So we see the alternative presented in the report as a lower cost option. The difference would be there'd be a higher case fee, but no retainer fee, so we'd have to get in line with their workload that CGI has. But certainly it does offer some value in terms of resolving disputes in the neighborhood, but not particularly for law enforcement matters.
So if there are other comments from my committee members, I'll look forward to hearing them, and then if you could come back to me, I would like to move that alternative and maybe even put an upset limit on it. Thanks.
All right, and so that's the one alternative that's in the report. I'll come back to you at the time. Is there any other speakers who wish to speak to staff on this? Seeing none, Councillor Farr, I'll come back to you for a motion, please.
So through you, that should ask, what would be, knowing that the average cost for this program, it was about $5,000, I guess, annually. Is it fair to say we could have an upset limit, and understanding there's only really been, it's the referrals that cost the money. So maybe two-part question, how much would each referral cost if it went through full mediation with this alternative, and what gets us to half what we pay now with this alternative? What would get us roughly to $2,500 to $2,800 annually as the maximum cost for this service, just to be able to say we still have mediation through you, Chair?
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Marty?
So through Madam Chair, the cost of the 2-year pilot where 4 cases were resolved was $11,175. If you look at the alternative of $400 per case, we'd be looking at about $1,600 for the same number of referrals that went through right through to mediation.
So I'll simply then just move the alternative. If I could get a seconder, please.
All right.
Okay, we could cap it at $2,500? Is that comfortable? Are you comfortable with a cap in the motion through you, Chair, to add that to this alternative?
Marty?
So through you, Madam Chair, I'm assuming that the funding source is going to be absorbed in our budget, and we're comfortable with $2,500.
All right, and that would be citywide?
Yes, that'd be correct.
All right, not just for your ward.
No. And seconded by Councillor Pearson, then with that cap of 25? Yep.
Yeah, Councillor Pearson, please go ahead.
Thank you. I'm pleased to second that. And I think, in fairness, we did this as a pilot, and I would suggest that we get a report in a year and see how things are going as far as the number of residents that we're able to assist in the costing. So I would make that part of the motion, a friendly amendment to Councillor Farr's motion, that we get a report in a year.
A report back in a year?
So through Madam Chair, yes, I agree with that. And also we would come sooner if we found that we were approaching our cap. We'd let you know if we were going to run out, so we will do that.
Okay, fine. Thank you. Madam Clerk, you have that? Okay. All right. So coming back to Councillor Farr with your motion to approve the alternative suggested in the report with a $2,500 limit that would be citywide, and staff report back in a year or less, depending on where we're reaching that cap. Moved by yourself, seconded by Councillor Maria Pearson. All in favor, please. That is carried. Anyone opposed? Thank you. And moving on to 8.2, which is the establishment of a specialized bylaw enforcement unit. It's on the outstanding business list. And Councillor Johnson, please. Brenda Johnson and Maria Pearson.
Thank you very much. And this question is directly through you to Marty. Marty, if you can spur my memory a little bit about how this started in the first place, was there a particular hot spots in the area, in the city, that this is where this noise bylaw officer was to be directed?
So through Madam Chair, they do respond to noise complaints, or were responding to noise complaints at all hours of the night many years ago, before 2007. Certainly the greatest issue was student noise parties and that sort of thing on weekends in Westdale, Mohawk College area, but also loud parties and noise and bands throughout the city, but not as frequent in those areas. And we found out more often than not, our staff would be called out, they'd be on standby, we'd pay them 4 hours call out, they'd get to a house, and they weren't sure whether they should knock on the door because it was maybe an unsafe situation. So they'd be sitting on the street waiting for police backup. So a consultant came in 2008 and recommended that our hours of work stop at 1 a.m. in terms of city staff, and after 1 a.m. it would be a responsibility of the police to respond to those calls. It worked well for a while. The police have what they call a priority level 4 response, so they get to them when they get to them. However, in many cases in recent years, the police priorities have changed, so they don't respond to the calls in a timely manner. And I know Council Marilla had one where they called in at 2 in the morning. The police responded at 8:30, when their workload went down, so the noise had gone. In other cases, they're simply not getting to them, and they had about 1,000 dropped calls in 2012. So it is all over the city, but there are certain areas, and again, there's certain times of the day. So Thursday nights, Friday nights, and Saturdays are most prevalent when people are socializing and having parties.
Thank you for that. I guess my first reaction to that is we just finished going through the mediation process. And my first gut reaction was, if this is a chronic house, if this is a chronic neighbor, would it then make more sense to go to mediation? If this is a one-time bash that happened and its noise levels, no offense, but being harmed by it other than a loss of sleep. So could this not be turned over to mediation? Could this not be dealt with? I don't know. I'm just finding that almost $150,000 to deal with this seems a little bit higher than I'm comfortable with.
Marty?
So, through Madam Chair, I guess there would be the odd case where mediation would work, but my gut tells me that's not the case. There are a lot of transient people moving in and out of the city, especially students, and so they come and go, and those cases wouldn't work for mediation.
Okay. So through you to Marty, theoretically, there's a big bash going on next door. I got to work in the morning. I call you. I call bylaw. The bylaw officer now, it's a police officer that's assigned specifically for this, correct?
Madam Chair, this would be a joint response where one of our officers would work with the police after hours, and they would respond. The police would ensure that it's a safe situation for us to enter. We would do the charges so that take the workload off the police so they don't have to sit in court. And also we would be able to apply what council's approved fees for service for extra attention, so we'd be able to generate some revenue as well. And the police wouldn't be stuck in court and having to do all the paperwork.
Okay, so that's a good segue into my next question. So I'm the bylaw officer. I call the police. There is someone, I'm assuming there's someone on the police department that's dedicated to just helping me when I go to these noise bylaw complaints?
Marty?
So through Madam Chair, it would be a special duty officer, so they sign up for special duty for Hess Village, Tiger Cat football games. This would be a police officer working extra duty time.
Okay, now that's 2 questions. One is this something now, as you said, revenue generated? Because that was the other issue, is at the end of the day, I had the big bash, I get charged, what's the upset limit for me as far as the host of that party, and you found me to be guilty, or you're taking me to court now because I had a big bash and it upset the neighbors?
Marty?
So through Madam Chair, the fine would be about $260 plus any fees for service that we apply for processing fees.
Okay, thank you. And through you to Marty, you've just labeled 2 predictable events that will happen that generate noise, one being the entertainment district, being Hess Village, and the other one being Ticat games. Is there any way now we can include them into this cost sharing because they're the ones that are generating the chronic noise that we're getting the complaints about?
So through Madam Chair, when I linked those, what I was meaning to say is the police sign up for special duty. So they sign up for overtime to work Hess Village Extra Time and Tiger Cat football games. I did not mean to imply that they're doing
Okay, sorry.
noise complaints.
Okay, so theoretically and ideally, we have these noise bylaw officers that we've now going to budget 150,000. See if I get this straight. It'll be 65,600 for the bylaw officer and 76,000, almost 77,000 for a special duty police officer to deal with noise bylaws, with the hope that we can charge people $250 for every time that there's a noise bylaw that actually gets to court and actually gets passed and be fined and charged, correct?
Marty?
So through Madam Chair, yes, that would be correct. And one of the key measurements that we'd be looking at is how much revenue we would be generating through the pilot. But more importantly, there were 1,000 calls that simply were not responded to by the police.
Okay.
And Planning Committee expressed concern that that was not an appropriate level of service for the community.
Okay, thank you. And this is a pilot project for, just to remind me? For how long?
Through Madam Chair, we're recommending it be referred to the budget process, but we're recommending a one-year pilot. It would, by the time, if the budget was approved, it'd start up in May, so we'd get the outdoor seasons, we get a full year of the summer months, and be a good measure of the pilot.
Okay. So at the appropriate time, I'd be willing to move this to the 2015 budget. Thank you.
All right, I'll come back to you. Councillor Pearson, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd certainly be pleased to second this because I'm really pleased that this is before us today. Ironically, just yesterday, I received another complaint with regards to a sports bar facility in my ward, and I get the ongoing every time calls are made to the police that it's not priority. They're not responding. I have a residential neighborhood that abuts this facility, and there's just been a recent change in ownership for the sports bar, and I don't know how to deal with this without this particular motion and the direction going forward. So I am thrilled to second this. I think it's appropriate. I'd be happy to support it at budget deliberations, and a one-year pilot would be great. And if anything, we keep a log of these calls. I'm hoping that it's that education process and that, you know, iron fist that says, okay, you gotta stop this. You have to take the appropriate measures, that we reduce the number of calls that we will be dealing with.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pearson. And Councillor Farr, please, then Councillor Green.
Through you, Chair, to Marty, and I'll ask, I think we have reps from Hamilton Police Services, if they could come down while I ask Marty. I'll have a question for them about the paid duty aspect of this, but through you to Marty. So provided you get this through budget, the recommendation is take it to budget, and I'm hoping for the best here, all things considered, and I'm glad you mentioned the over 1,000 calls that we didn't respond to, and that's very difficult for council and even staff to answer the community as to why we didn't have the resources. So this answers that. Through you, though, for MLE, is it consistency in terms of the officer? It's the same officer all the time?
Madam Chair, no, it may not be the same officer all the time. It would be one of our special enforcement officers assigned to work those hours with a police officer, but we would have consistency in how we approach the calls, because quite often the police get pulled away. They don't get to do all the full investigations. They don't do the paperwork, so we'd be able to apply fees for service and recover some of our costs, which is not always being done now.
Councillor?
I'm so having trouble understanding why did we not contemplate maintaining the same person for the job, like you have a Lori for licensing, for example, through you, Chair, just for consistency's sake.
So through Madam Chair, we could do that, but when that person's off or sick, then we don't have any coverage.
Okay. Councillor?
Okay, and do we have someone from HPS, Marty, through you, Chair?
Yeah, would you please come down to the first available microphone, I guess, for questions?
So as he makes his way down, and I'm sure he'll identify himself, he doesn't look familiar to me, but through you, Chair, understanding that, the more tricky part, I think, of this is we want consistency. The report says, and I want to support the report through the budget process, just as the previous speaker, Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights. And recently in the West Harbor area, we had an establishment through actual motion from the landlords request 2 paid duty officers because of some noise issues there. And Hamilton Police Services, over the course of many weeks, continued to tell upon this request, and I have the actual documentation from Hamilton Police Services as well, the owner of this property, that they couldn't fulfill the mandate of the landlord, which was the Waterfront Trust, to provide for the 2 paid duty officers because the paid duty officers were not available. Can you confirm here today through our chair that one at least would be available at all times, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and night at the hours specified in the report?
And welcome. Would you introduce yourself and state your position, please?
Good afternoon. Dave Calvert. I'm a superintendent with Hamilton Police. Through you, Madam Chair. That's correct. We were unable to fill them due to staffing. It's a voluntary thing. So if officers don't sign up or we've saturated based on the number of activities going on that particular week, we're unable to sustain that or fill that. We don't. Secondly, to answer the second part of your question, that's quite correct, sir. If, in fact, we can't fill that paid duty for the bylaw unit, then we wouldn't activate the unit that night, and that could happen. And my example to that would probably be around Pan Am Games, where we're going to be requiring a lot of staff. So during that particular month, that month in July, that may be a contentious issue, filling that particular duty Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Again, hard to say till it starts, but certainly a potential.
Councillor?
So what I'm hearing is no assurances from the HPS side, notwithstanding that it appears here in the budget as consistent Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Interesting. Okay, I'll think that over and certainly keep a closer eye, not only on just the one that we would require to make this program successful and consistent, but as well for future where needed elsewhere, and maybe have that conversation with the Hamilton Police Services Board. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Green, please.
Madam Chair, through you to, I guess it'd be Hamilton Police Services, just kind of more of a comment or a thought on the 1,000 or so missed calls. And
yes,
I think it's also worth noting that it's not noise complaints aren't a victimless crime, that oftentimes they kind of are you know, on a continuum to things like domestic violence and abuse, as though we're seeing things, especially in Ward 3, around teen violence. And I'm just wondering, in capturing this data, like out of the 1,000 or so calls that are missed, the ones that are responded to, how many of those result in further charges that might be beyond just, say, a party?
Go ahead, please.
Through you, Madam Chair. I couldn't tell you, I don't have that data in front of me, how many charges would result from that, so I'd be guessing.
I'll refine the question. In your experience, have you seen in these instances of complaints that started off as noise complaints actually result in charges outside of noise complaints?
Absolutely. So, for example, you may respond to a noise complaint, you may arrive, and it may turn into a criminal investigation based on what's occurring, what you're seeing, or what's reported to you when you arrive at the scene. So certainly something else can occur as a result of a simple noise complaint, as we say.
Councillor?
So given that understanding, Madam Chair, through you to the Hamilton Police Services, could it be then accepted that oftentimes noise complaints are the I guess, the first entry point for neighborhood complaints in situations that do tend to go beyond just noise?
Through you, Madam Chair, I would not use the word often, sir. I would use it does happen on occasion. And again, not having that in front of me, I would be making a guess. But often wouldn't be the term I would use, sir.
Okay, Councillor?
I just wanted some clarity on that because I thought it was worth noting that, especially in Ward 3, oftentimes these situations are the case.
Yes, exactly. Okay, thank you. Now I have no other speakers, so I'll come back to Councillor Brenda Johnson, please, for a motion.
I move that 8.2 be referred to the 2015 budget process, please.
And that's seconded by Councillor Maria Pearson. All in favor?
Carried.
And comment, Councillor Farr.
Very
Absolutely.
quickly, the more I think about it, the more I definitely would want to look closer at some consistency. I'm confident from the MLE side that we'll have an officer, hopefully one who works regular on this particular file, so he gets more comfortable with it. I mean, safety was the big issue from the bylaw officer side, and the reason why we don't do anything after 1 o'clock and why there are over 1,000 not addressed because of the safety issue, as the consultant said years ago. But that's also why we have a police officer, and without the firm knowledge that we have consistency from the HPS side with a dedicated officer to this file, of which we're funding the Hamilton Police Services Board to the tune of $70-something thousand, I really I may have more of an issue with it, Madam Chair, and through you, it looks like Marty may have a comment to this end.
Marty,
So,
please.
Through Madam Chair, if this was to be approved by council through the 2015 budget process, we would work with the police and develop a set of key performance measures. So how many calls are we responding to? What's the result? How many fines are generated revenues? We would also keep track of any incidents where the police were not available to work, and we would be able to report that back to you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor?
So he's turned it into a measurable for this year-long pilot, which is the genius of Marty Hazel. I look forward to offline discussion on this. Thanks.
Yes, and he is a genius. Thank you. All right, so on that motion then, all in favor? Carried. And anyone opposed? No one opposed. Okay, we have no motions. Any notices of motion? Seeing none, I'll move on to general information and other business. And Jason, do you want to speak now or when we're finished? Okay, go ahead. Jason Thorne, our general manager, would like to make some comments, please.
Thanks very much, Madam Chair. I just wanted to update committee on a couple of items. First of all, just to welcome everybody back, and to the new faces, welcome to Planning Committee. We are, as a department, going to be hosting next week an information session with each of the new councillors to have them meet the management team, and we're going to go through a who does what within our department and the key functions that we serve. So we'll look forward to spending some time with the new councillors next week on that. A quick update for council. At the last council meeting of the previous term, I announced that it looked like we were going to hit the $1 billion mark in building permit value for the fourth time out of 5 years. I can confirm that we did now do that. We're over $1 billion for November, about $25 million over for November. And that's the fastest we've hit that number only one other time did we hit that number faster in the previous 5 years. So we did hit that, yes.
So we did hit that. It sounded like you said did not,
I'm
but
speaking
we
too
did.
quickly. We did.
Yeah.
We are at, yes. And
Go ahead.
a couple other items. One is that I just wanted to advise committee of some changes we've made to the structure and format of our liaison group with the Hamilton Halton Home Builders Association. We had in the past been meeting on a approximately monthly basis with the group. Going forward in consultation with the Home Builders Association, we're putting in place a new structure. We're going to have twice per year a public forum with the development industry where we would have our staff present on some key issues that are of interest to the development community and presentations from the development industry as well in a forum that's open to any member of the public to attend. We'll of course advise committee members if they would like to attend as well and observe those presentations. We don't yet have a firm date as to when the first one will be. We'll be aiming for sometime in February and we're meeting shortly with the home builders to devise an agenda for that. So we'll be doing that twice per year going forward.
And Jason, where will those meetings be held?
Haven't yet landed on a venue. We were considering council chambers as one option.
Wonderful.
But likely somewhere in City Hall, so there's lots of room for members of the public if they want to come and attend and observe.
I would encourage that. I think it's so important that we have these as public meetings, number one, and that number two, they be open to the public, and I think it would be appropriate to have it at City Hall somewhere. So thank you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. I did advise all members of council late last week about changes to the structure of the planning division. Steve has done a restructure for his team, just recognizing that the previous structure of an east-west orientation wasn't really reflective of the types of issues, the types of expertise we need in our planning staff, the kinds of issues they were addressing. So Steve has put in place a new structure where we have an urban team, which will be led by Ed John, a suburban team to be led by Tammy Kitai, who's a new planner on staff, and a rural team to be headed by Heather Travis. Each of those three will still report through Anita as the manager and through Steve as the chief planner. So we circulated to council those names, contact information, as well as a map showing how those divisions break down. And lastly, I want to let committee know that thanks to the work of Bill Jansen, one of the directors in planning, as well as Irene Godet and Sue Monarch in our tourism division, Hamilton will be hosting in 2016 the annual meeting of the Ontario Professional Planners Institute. So we'll have a little over 500 planners from across the province in our city for presentations, as well as we'll be doing hopefully some walking tours and biking tours around the city to show them some of the recent work in planning that we have in this city.
Excellent, excellent. Congratulations to everybody. Thank you, Jason. Moving on to outstanding business list. Motion to amend the outstanding business list as outlined in item 11.1A and B. Moved by Councillor Pearson, seconded by Councillor Collins. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And let's see, I think we're almost done here. Moving on to private confidential. If there's no discussion required respecting the closed session minutes of September 19th, may I have a motion to be received and directed that they remain confidential and restricted from public disclosure? That would be Councillor Green and Councillor Conley. All in favor? That is carried and no one opposed. And motion to adjourn, please. Councillor Pearson.
My apologies, Madam Chair. You mentioned item 11, and it was going fast. I moved it. Item PP, sign variance application. Did that not just get referred over to February 3rd? We're saying that it be removed. It's not to be removed. It's just a new date. Sorry.
That's correct.
Correct? So
Yeah,
we're going to
that's
reflect
correct.
the correction in the changes to the agenda today was that it be referred to the February 3rd committee meeting.
Right. Thank you for catching that.
Thank
So
you.
B shouldn't have been on the list then, right? It's just for 11.1A. Excellent catch, Councillor Pearson, as always. And a motion to adjourn, we did not have that. And I think I said Councillor Green and Councillor Conley. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, everyone. Excellent meeting.